You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and actual brother, Dave. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, but I keep hearing it's like a screaming. It's some kind of screaming, like a child's voice. I don't know. It'll go away.
You wait, like screaming of lambs, or like a screaming over here?
I guess it could be the lambs. Yeah, it's the lambs. It's the lambs.
Because one of my cats was just freaking out, and he sounds like a small child when he gets upset.
Well, I guess the lambs will keep on screaming.
Yep. Oh, boy, yeah. So, hey, we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at that werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
For fun. Follow us. If you do that thing, we're definitely an accounts to follow. We have a good time. I'm also
I'm like real lo-fi social media user. I'm like the MS Paint of social media.
I'm gonna say you're pretty good at it, because all those graphics that we post on our main, that's all you come up with that.
Oh
stuff.
Yeah, no, I do that.
That's good stuff. I'm over on TikTok, dancing, prancing, and dancing.
Can dancing the night away.
Just getting it done. That's what
shaking your groove thing, as it were.
Yeah, if you do that sort of thing, look us up by name over there. And if you don't know, we have another show called 99 Cent Rental, where we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that Bring Me the Axe is off. Our latest episode covering Masters of the Universe is out now with guest Johnny Atkinson from Week Horror.
Yep. Great guest. Mediocre movie.
Yep. Great guest. Great guy. Love having him on the show. And we'll be back next year with a look at Ghidorah, the three-headed monster.
Ghidorah. King Ghidorah.
That's going to be fun. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search for us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So get to it.
For the love of God, get to it.
What do you got to lose? That's what I ask.
Just your self-respect.
And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor, give the episode a like and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. And we do. Just want to get that all out of the way at the top of the show, because this is a big show. Big show. It's a big number for us. This is episode 50. Yep. We're celebrating
50 years old.
It's actually movie 48, because we've done a couple of episodes that weren't like single movie specific, but episode 50.
Yeah, because technically our next episode was supposed to be 50, and it's a bit of an iconic moment. We have iconic guests for an iconic film.
Yeah.
So that was really supposed to be the big one, but we fucking blew it.
It'll be great anyways. So let's give you a taste. I mean, you've read the episode description. You already know what we're talking about, but I'm going to give you a taste anyway. Here's a taste of what we're talking about for our 50th episode.
You spook easily, Starling?
Not yet, sir.
He's past the others. The last cell. I'll be watching. You'll do fine.
A killer is on the loose.
Keeps them alive for 3 days. Then he shoots them, skins them, and dumps them.
A rookie FBI agent is on his trail.
He's got real physical strength, cautious, precise, and he's never impulsive. He'll never stop.
But in order to track him down, she'll have to match wits.
I'll help you catch him, Clarice.
Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head.
With the darkest of all minds.
Just do your job, but never forget what he is.
Oh, he's a monster. Pure psychopath. So rare to capture one alive.
So close to the way you're going to catch him. Do you realize that? Oh, Clarice, your problem is you need to get more fun out of life.
You told me you don't spook easily.
You call this easy, sir?
Lecter's missing hand arms.
Man's a raving maniac. Who knows what he'll do?
Thank you, Clarice. Thank you.
I can't believe Scott fucking Glenn gets like top billing in this movie.
Oh, I know. You know what else it really kind of gets me is I watched it a couple of times. It really stuck out to me is Chris Isaac gets credit billing in the like opening credits. He's in the movie for like 30 seconds.
But he was a pretty bill. That was like peak Chris Isaac. Was like 91, 92. That's that Herb Ritz video for Wicked Game, the one with what's her face in it.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he would have like you would have been watching the thing and been like, "Oh shit, I can't wait to see Chris Isaac." And it's like, well, okay, it's about 4 seconds, so he has dialogue.
Savor those 4 seconds of that that wonderful quaff of his.
I love Chris Isaac.
He's gonna turn up the next year in Firewalk with me. So yeah, this is the beginning of the Chris Isaac empire.
Which is weird because he didn't do a lot of acting, and then all of a sudden he had a show for like 4 years.
You know, he's like one of those people who sort of shows up and they cross as much media as they can. Like he's a musician, he's on TV, and he's a thing like fucking. You ever heard of that guy Machine Gun Kelly?
Vaguely.
He like popped up and he was like he was like a
rap.
He was like a rap guy, and then like he was a pop punk guy, and then he was in the fucking Motley Crue movie, and then he vanished because nobody was buying any of it. I kind of feel like that was Chris Isaac's deal, except everybody was like, "Yeah, I like that guy. He's hot." So
well, he is, but he had a great fucking voice.
Yeah, man.
I tell you what, I picked the wrong beer for this 50th celebration.
What do you got? What are you drinking over there?
Well, I'm drinking
Is it toilet wine?
It is not cheer wine. It is a saison. It's by a Saison du Roost.
Yeah, all right.
It is by River Roost, which is a Vermont brewery. On draft, this is a delicious saison. This particular one, though, I'm not feeling it. I think it's the Galaxy hop. They dry hop with Galaxy, and I'm not a big Galaxy person.
God, I should have done that. I should have ordered some cheer wine for this episode. It's a special episode.
The 90s, the fucking serial killers were having the best week ever in the 90s.
This was at a time when like right now you go to the fucking bookstore and they've got like shelves upon shelves upon shelves of fucking like true crime books, because it's all the hotness and shit. And then but 1991 when this movie came out, you'd go to like a bookstore and they'd have like a shelf and it would be
you bought this shit at the grocery store. That's where you bought these books.
Yeah, like a few of them. They'd have a few of them and like half of them were written by Ann Rule.
Yeah. Yeah. And you put them on the counter and you'd be like, oh, I guess this too. What a lark, right? And then you get home and tear into it.
Yep.
It's like you're reading Peyton Place.
Oh man, I fucking love, that's the thing. I'm OG true crime, which is maybe why I like this movie as much as I do. Cause I fucking love this movie. Oh, like a lot. And I was buying that shit back then. And then
you were.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it sort of pops up as the fucking podcast hotness. And I was like, God damn.
Hey, don't knock it.
No.
Some of us, that's how we pay our rent.
I'd say a lot of our popularity kind of hinges on our adjacency to one of the big ones. So, oh boy. Yeah.
I like to think I'm a little more than adjacent. Thank you very much.
It's just me over here. I'm just riding on your coattails.
Yes.
But yeah.
The Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, man. It was a fucking sensation.
Have the lambs stopped screaming, Clarice? This is a wild movie. I hadn't seen it in quite some time. I think I saw, obviously saw it back in the 90s, not when it came out, but probably not too long after. And then I watched it maybe once or twice in between then and now, and I watched it again. There are a lot of things I think are really incredible about this movie, and there's a lot of things that I think are not incredible about this movie.
All right, I can't wait to hear. I can't wait to hear about it because this movie definitely it's definitely not perfect. It's very.
No, the first time you watched it, you were like, "Oh man, it's the best fucking movie I've ever seen," and I was like, "Really?"
But yeah. So the year was 1991, year of our Lord. Mm-hmm. So here's some other movies that were released in 1991. Cast a Deadly Spell came out, which I believe was made for
the Fred Ward movie.
Yeah, it was made. I think it was made for HBO.
Yes,
it's pretty good. It's like a kind of pulpy noir thing, but also with like H.P. Lovecraft stuff.
Yeah, Fred Ward is great.
Mm-hmm. Love him. Ghoulies 3. Ghoulies Go to College.
Not good. That year. Not good at all.
Nope. Christmas
Ape. I can't make it through a single Ghoulies movie, to be honest with you.
Christmas Ape Goes to College.
Exactly.
1991 also saw the release of The Pit and the Pendulum, the Stuart Gordon movie. And let me tell you about that one. Lance Henriksen acting the shit out of that role. He is going crazy in that one.
He's about the only good thing in that movie.
I enjoy that one quite. I love that one a lot. I watched it just recently. I went on a Stuart Gordon tear, and I caught that. I think it was like right after I watched the Robot Jocks from that Arrow box.
Okay.
I was like, I gotta watch some more of them Stuart Gordon movies, and I queued that one up. Also in 1991, Puppet Master 2 and Puppet Master 3 were released in 1 year.
I'll tell you what, I think the second one is actually pretty good. The third one is not good.
I love Puppet Master 2 is definitely the peak of the series, and it's kind of all downhill from there, but that downhill ride, I kind of love it.
I used to hate those movies, and then I think in the last couple of years, I was like, I don't know, this shit's kind of fun.
Yep. And closing out, 1991, Steel and Lace came out, which you just recently watched after I told you had to watch it.
So good. So good.
Oh.
It is, you know what? I would, if I was doing programming a double feature, I would do, what's the Alien one with Lemro?
Oh, Alien Private Eye.
Yeah, I would do that one and Steel and Lace. Because those movies are equally nuts.
Steel and Lace is gonzo as hell. Like, when I first put it on, I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. And a few minutes into it, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this one. And then the first kill happens, and I was like, oh shit, I am so in. And it just got better from there.
Yeah, it's rare. I go into those movies. This is like a lot of this shit that I would say until relatively recently, this is like the stuff that Vinegar Syndrome was cranking out.
Yeah.
Probably because it's super cheap. It's like a lot of it, it's the stuff I would watch like one time and be like, okay, I saw it. It was slow and a little bit uneventful and pretty anticlimactic. But every now and then you hit upon one and it's like, holy shit, this movie is insane and I'm loving every minute of it.
We got to do both of those next year when we start to schedule more movies, because those are fucking great movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a cast and crew to discuss here. We got director Jonathan Demme. Or Demme.
Demme?
I don't know.
Demme.
Yeah. One of the many filmmakers to emerge from the Roger Corman factory and go on to direct great movies. He hits in the 70s with a handful of low-budget exploitation crap, and New World, notably among them.
Caged Heat is a great movie.
Caged Heat fucking rules. I watched it just recently and loved every goddamn minute of it. It is Barbara Steele stealing the show.
Yep.
Let's see. That one followed Demme around like a millstone around his neck once his mainstream movies gained some acclaim. His career has some really weird twists and turns, though, starting with the Talking Heads concert movie Stop Making Sense, which is incredible. He's got some weirdo comedies in there, like Something Wild. He's got Die Hard social dramas like Philadelphia, and grimy true crime affairs such as this one. Yeah.
He also made Beloved.
Yeah. Capable filmmaker. Not a favorite, but I like. Yeah. He's got a couple of spots in his resume that I really.
He seems like the kind of guy. I think he died fairly young, right? He had a heart attack when he was like 50 something. It seems like he never really found a groove. Like, how a lot of those guys that came from sort of Corman's crew settled into something. It was usually like horror or exploitation or sci-fi or whatever. And Jonathan Demme seems like he never really did. He was just like, I'll just make movies. And sometimes those movies were really well received, and then other times people were like, that was a weird choice.
Yeah. He must have been one of those guys who was just like not content to sort of like fit into, just sort of like slip into a groove and kind of find a thing. You like want to try a little of everything.
Yeah, easy, Danny Boyle. Like, you reel it in. Yeah. Stay in your lane. You're like my doctor who thinks she can do everything.
So our cast includes the great Jodie Foster. You might remember her from such Disney films as Candle Shoe and Freaky Friday before breaking out into more serious fare as a teenager in Taxi Driver and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Oh, such a fantastic film.
And Hitler Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah. You might remember her from being a weird lesbian in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, she's also in The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane.
Yeah, that movie fucking rules.
Movie that's pretty goddamn good. Jodie breaks from acting in the 80s to attend Yale and returns to acting in 1988 with The Accused, for which she wins Best Actress, and then does it again with her next picture.
Yeah, she also took a break in the 80s because someone was going to murder her.
Yeah. Oh, man, and he almost got Reagan. Almost got him. God damn.
So I was listening to something recently where they were talking about Steve Scalise, and they were like, Republican senator and guy who bleeds too slow, Steve Scalise.
Yeah. She has a hell of a run through the 90s and then breaks out into directing. I was thrilled to see her return to screen in the last season of True Detective. That was a welcome addition to reviving a pretty good series.
I think she is. As far as I can tell, she's like a capable director. Her weird allegiance to like Mel Gibson, I find a little off-putting.
I know.
But she seems like sort of like, you know how when people like her or Drew Barrymore or, you know, like people who've been in Hollywood pretty much forever, they become so insulated that like your world is your world and you know nothing else. And so it just doesn't seem weird that the people around you are like fucking sociopaths.
That's got to be it. Because she was definitely sort of born into this system. Like she's a California kid, and her brother was supposed to be the like sort of the child star, and then she just kind of slipped in there by accident. You know, here we are.
Yeah. Because Mel Gibson is a huge sack of shit.
Massive piece of garbage.
And the fact I think I was always put off by her willingness to like entertain his douchebaggery and just be like to be a Mel Gibson apologist.
I know.
But and then I was also one of those this in my younger years, one of those people that was just like, hey, why don't you stop being so homophobic and just tell everyone you're a lesbian? Now I would be like, who fucking cares, lady? You'd be whatever you want, whenever you want.
That's a real weird story there. She got outed by the Village Voice.
Yeah, and that's not cool.
No, that sucks, man.
But she's really fucking good in this.
She's great. Oh my God. And I mean, and not to mention, like, she's the roadmap for Dana Scully.
Yeah,
so,
obviously.
You know, like right down to the hair, like just, it's a foundational piece of horror going into the 90s. Jodie read the book upon release and loved it so much that she tried to option it herself, but found that it was already in development with Gene Hackman. So she worked overtime to get the part.
And Jonathan Demme didn't even want her. He wanted Michelle Pfeiffer.
He's one of those guys who like gets like a cast that he likes and just wants to work with him because he knows he can work with them. But I'm, fucking glad that like she just went shoulder to the wheel and fucking pushed.
Yeah, I don't think Michelle Pfeiffer would have been very good at this.
No, because I saw some of the other names of people who like read for the role or were approached, and I was like, none of these people are very good. Molly Ringwald apparently read for the part as well, which would have been very funny.
I don't think I could have taken it seriously.
No. Also, got to mention Sir Anthony Hopkins, an English stage actor of some acclaim who came to everyone's attention in 1980 when he appeared in David Lynch's breakout picture, The Elephant Man. Prior to that and after, Hopkins was a major star at the Royal National Theatre. But following The Elephant Man, his career kind of floundered a bit among some titles.
He was in Audrey Rose. that actually might have been before The Elephant Man.
I believe that's a 70s movie, yeah. And his career kind of floundered before he took on this role. This was supposed to be like, this will be my last one. Like, if this doesn't work for me, I'm just going back to this stage. And then, holy shit.
I'm going to give you a hot take. I don't think Anthony Hopkins is a very good actor. I think he's good in this.
I think he's a good actor.
I think he's good in this movie, but I think everybody saw this movie and he has been living off this goodwill since then. I think he's fine. He's competent, but I don't think he's like as good as everyone thinks he is.
Hot take.
He's got about one fucking speed, and I've just never been that impressed. Though I will say, watching it this time around, he is very good in this.
He is good. Do you have you seen the other like sort of incarnations of this? Like, you seen Manhunter?
Yes, that's the William Peterson one.
Yeah,
first one. Yeah.
So like, where do you land on that? Like, who's your favorite Lecter?
I think Anthony Hopkins is, because who is it in that one? It's
Brian Cox is that one.
Yeah, Brian Cox is a good fucking actor though, and he can be creepy as shit.
Yeah, like there's plenty of people who I feel are being like kind of contrarian, where they're always like, Brian Cox is the better Lecter. And it's like, I recently watched Manhunter. No, he fucking isn't. He's fine, but he's not Anthony Hopkins in this.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins, I think, defines this role.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, Anthony Hopkins is not my favorite Lecter.
Is it Mads Mikkelsen?
Mads Mikkelsen is my favorite. I fucking love that show too. Like
I've never seen. I've seen a couple
My
episodes. I've never
enthusiasm
watched
for this franchise and these characters, like it is broad, and I
Oh, because it goes way downhill after this.
it definitely does. And I want to talk about Hannibal a little bit because I fucking love that book. Hate the movie, but I love the book. Yeah, he was just about to give up, go back to stage when this movie fucking changed his life, turned him into Sir Anthony Hopkins, basically.
Okay.
And he loves the character too, quite a bit, and I think that's what kind of explains his frequent returns to the character.
And that counts for a lot because you can see he is living in this role.
Oh yeah, and a lot of the shit that like makes that character so iconic and so memorable were like his ideas.
The fact that he barely blinks.
Yep. He like all of the shit that's like characteristic when you think of Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, all of that shit was stuff that he brought to the role. Like when they introduce him, he's just standing to attention in the middle of his cell. That was him.
The gay coding I could do without. That feels very 90s to me. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be a gay character.
But he's not.
In the movie, I think he is supposed to be.
Because there's supposed to be a sexual tension between him and Starling.
Oh, yeah, there is definitely not. He reads her like a fucking drag queen every time they see each other.
Yeah, I've read some stuff that, like, I don't fucking know if I believe it or not, or if it's apocryphal, but everybody's like, he based it on Truman Capote. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Have these people ever seen any interviews with Truman Capote? Because no, he didn't. Truman Capote was like, is raving queen acceptable to say?
Yeah, it's queenie as hell. Queeniest of New York.
And I say that with tons of affection. He is my favorite author, but he absolutely is not based on Truman Capote.
Yeah, I think that there is a
he gives it like a Tennessee Williams vibe.
There is a fey quality to Hannibal Lecter in this movie, but he's not supposed. That's something that Hopkins did. He is definitely not like a gay character.
He reads extremely gay.
He does kind of, and I don't fucking.
I mean, he is sassy. He's very sharp tongued and mean in like in a very drag queen kind of way.
He's like a drag race contestant.
He's really shady and cutting in like a really sarcastic way that feels. I think a lot of gay men would have watched it and been like,
Yeah, and rounding out our cast, Ted Levine.
And I think he is the best of this entire movie. His performance in this is insanely good.
Yeah, he is an actor that was utterly ruined for me by this movie. He plays this role so powerfully that
I don't know how you'd even recognize him in anything else. He looks completely different.
Yeah, it wasn't until Monk when I was like, oh shit, it's fucking Ted Levine. It's Ted Levine. But he does kind of like fall into other characters. Like this is a singular character for him that unfortunately kind of followed him around for a few years where everybody was like, we got to have Buffalo Bill in our movie. And so all he got cast as was like villains. And so it kind of took some savvy agent work to kind of get him into parts that weren't like Buffalo Bill.
I mean, yeah, he does basically the same character in Joyride. I mean, it's just a voice, but he does that. He's I think he's a bad guy in Shutter Island.
Yep.
He's not the bad guy, but he's a bad guy. He's not bad in Heat, I don't think.
No, he's one of the cops in yeah.
But yeah, he's basically because he's so fucking good in this movie.
Oh God, yeah, because
like he's funny, he's bizarre and off-putting.
Yeah, because it's definitely he is a sharp contrast to the Tooth Fairy from Red Dragon, who's played by Tom Noonan. Fucking
which one's the Tooth Fairy?
Yeah.
Oh, Red Dragon? I thought that was
no.
What's his
He
face?
plays
Ray Fiennes.
in Manhunter. He plays Red Dragon. Red Dragon's the book. Red Dragon's also the remake. But
right,
yeah, motherfucker. God, that guy's great in that. But like, he is just like he has none of this sort of.
And that's the one with the eyes, the mirror in the eyes thing.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I believe he's based on what the fuck is that guy's name? I just said it. Peter Manuel. It's a real the Beast of Birkenshaw.
Oh yeah,
what they called him. He was a real narcissistic piece of crap. I mean, they pretty much all are, but
yeah, no. Buffalo Bill, easily one of the best screen monsters of that I can think of. That character is so fucking singular, creepy, and alarming. God, I love him.
Yeah, he's great.
Yep. Here's a little bit of trivia, some stuff to know about this movie. This was adapted from a novel by Thomas Harris. The Silence of the Lambs was published in 1988, was the follow-up to his previous Hannibal Lecter novel, Red Dragon, which was, like we said, adapted by Michael Mann as Manhunter in 86. Unfortunately, that movie tanked super hard, which is too bad. It's a pretty good movie. It's
got a great soundtrack.
It's got that ending with Inagata Devita is so fucking cool. Even the weird editing that they use. God damn, it's good.
This one's got a great soundtrack. It's scored by Howard Shore.
Howard
really
Shore,
awesome.
and man, it sounds like it sounds like a Cronenberg movie, crazy. Yeah. So Manhunter was remade as Red Dragon with Anthony Hopkins as Lecter instead of Brian Cox and Ed Norton as Will Graham. It's followed.
Is Ralph Fiennes? Is that the one he's in?
Yes, that's the one that he plays Tooth Fairy in that one.
I guess I have seen them all.
It's followed by a third Lecter novel in 1999, simply called Hannibal, which was also adapted, with Julianne Moore playing Clarice, because the original ending turned Jodie Foster off so hard to it that she was like, pass. And
it's terrible. That movie I think is so fucking bad that they should just strike it from the record.
Well, the ending was changed because they wanted to leave it open for further sequels. And Harris's novel, which I don't know for sure. I can only speculate, but because what ends up happening is after this,
and that's the Monster of Florence one, right?
Yes. So after that one, Dino De Laurentiis has the rights for all these. And he wants to make another one. And he's like, Thomas Harris, will you write this next movie? And Harris is like, dude, did you not read my last book? I'm done with this. Like, the story is told. And
I have other books to write. No, you don't.
And he put another one out in 2019. Pretty good.
Did he?
But De Laurentiis was like, okay, fine, but I'm going to do this without you. So you can do it with me or I can do it without you. And he was like, fuck it. Fine, I'll write this thing just so he can sort of like have control over his characters and not have somebody else like writing his story, basically. But yeah, the ending of Hannibal, the book, is one of my favorite fucking endings to a novel ever because
I think I read that one. I don't remember it at all.
So I'll just tell you, and then I'll bleep it all out anyway. Sorry, listener. Read the book. It's fucking outrageous. That's the one where Mason Verger, who's the bad guy.
It's when he cuts his face off, right?
Yes. So he lures.
I did read this one.
He uses.
Oh, I remember how it ends now.
Where he has the like a pen of like of pigs that he's with the help of Mason's sister, and she kills which was very, very funny. And then he takes her home and he helps her get better and he fucking helps her work through all of her childhood trauma. And then he.
Yep.
And then he. And then she.
And you think that's the end? That is the best ending to a book you've ever read?
It's so fucking decadent, ridiculous. And it's such a comic book. And
it is a slap in the face to every fan of that series.
It is the fucking best. And it is ridiculous. And the thing is it's Harris going, fuck this character. I'm so done. There's nothing you can possibly do with this story after this. So suck it.
Listen, for contrast, my favorite ending to a book is The Name of the Rose. I think one of us on this podcast is classier than the other, and I didn't think it was me.
For the record, I've read that book. I also think the ending to that book is hilarious.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Man, that's yeah, I love it because he is just like, fuck all y'all. I am done with Hannibal Lecter.
You know what I think is great about this movie? It was released on Valentine's Day.
Oh man, they must have advertised it as like the perfect date movie. They must have. I could find no such advertisements, but yeah.
I don't think they did a lot of advertising. This movie was very controversial when it came out. And there was a lot of protests, so I think they probably tried to minimize a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. That's the fucking elephant in the room that we got to talk about. Harris is an interesting author. He's not terribly prolific, but nearly all of his novels have been adapted to the screen, starting in 1975 with Black Sunday. And since then, he has almost exclusively written Hannibal Lecter novels and what I assume is a compromise to maintain control over his characters. Yep. In 2019, he published Kari Mora, his first novel in 44 years. It has nothing to do with Hannibal Lecter, and it's pretty good.
Kari Mora.
Mm-hmm. Starting in 2013, Brian Fuller ran an episodic series for television called Hannibal, which recast the principles and loosely adapted the first 3 books. Not so much The Silence of the Lambs, but I guess the first and the third book, really. Into a prestige television format with Mads Mikkelsen playing Hannibal. Like I said, he's my favorite portrayal of the character. The show's cast solid gold also.
Unfortunately, Brian Fuller, not a great person.
Yeah.
Why so? They all turn out to be kind of shitty.
Everybody. I tell you, man, like with this and like all these fucking YouTubers I keep hearing about now, like to be a high performer in media, you got to be a lunatic and a psychopath, apparently.
Well, you know what the common thread seems to be? They're all men. And
yeah.
they're just innocent men. They are not, unfortunately, just innocent men, as it turns out.
Not normal men either.
Nope.
No. Yeah. So, Hannibal was extremely gory for television and was unceremoniously canceled after 39 episodes.
Everybody always tells me to watch it.
It's
and I'm like,
good.
Stop recommending things to me. Yeah, but I've got that thing, though, where, like, anytime someone's like, oh, you got to see it, I'm like, no, I don't.
Well, I'm fucking telling
you. And then I'm immediately turned off to it, and I watch it, like, 30 years later, and I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. How about that?
That's pretty good. Fuck, I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The adaptation...
I'm like, the Beatles, you say? Give it a go.
Look at
I
this,
still hate the
look at
Beatles.
this Elvis Presley character.
And you said that was the Rolling Stones, was it?
The Rolling Bears?
The Bears? Rolling Bears?
Yeah. So the adaptation of Silence of the Lambs started before the book was even published. The book drops in 1988. Production began in 1987 with Gene Hackman partnering with Orion Pictures to produce, possibly direct and star in as Jack Crawford, but a few things transpired. Ted Talley...
Orion wasn't doing good at this point, though, were they?
What?
I mean, Orion was kind of on their way out, weren't they?
No, I think they were... Yes, I think they were kind of like... they were struggling, and this movie did a lot to sort of boost them a little bit. Yeah. Ted Talley's script pages were coming in and were very graphic, probably more than Hackman was expecting, and he had just come off of Mississippi Burning, and being that it was so dark and nasty, he bowed out of silence, leaving the option up for grabs.
Yeah, Mississippi Burning has an actual race riot in it, so he probably didn't want to go back to that.
No, back when this movie came out, the entire world suddenly learned all about Ed Gein, thanks to Buffalo Bill. Bill is actually a composite of 4 killers. A little of his backstory is revealed in the novel where he impulsively killed his parents when he was young, like Ed Kemper did. He's also a bit like Gary Heidnik, who kidnapped 6 women, kept them in a pit.
Hey, you want to hear my favorite thing about Gary Heidnik?
What is it?
When the police came to arrest him and they searched the house and they found like 6 dead bodies in the basement, his answer was, hey, look, man, they were here when I moved in.
I didn't know that.
That is literally what he said.
Oh, that is amazing.
I mean, that's not a direct quote, but that was basically his response was like, those aren't mine.
My God. Yeah.
Look, somebody else was just in there. It wasn't me.
Kidnapped 6 women, kept them in a pit. He dug out in his basement. He's kind of a true crime deep cut that I find utterly terrifying.
Yeah, he's pretty awful. I mean, they're all pretty awful. But
there's something about him in particular that I find really fucking alarming. Like, I don't know what it is. Bill's technique of luring women close to his van with an arm cast is something that Ted Bundy did for a time. And Ed Gein, of course, was a grave robber in Wisconsin, so ghoulish that he inspired Buffalo Bill, Norman Bates, and Leatherface, among others.
Which is interesting because in the pantheon of killers, I'm going to get to flex my skills here for a minute. In the pantheon of killers, Ed Gein, he looms quite large, and yet he only killed 2 people.
Possibly his brother as well.
May have killed 2. His brother, I think, I think he had a heart attack. He's like an oddly sympathetic character in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because he was so fucking crazy that, like, you're like, oh, you didn't even really know where you were most of the time.
Oh, yeah, he was so fucking psychotic that, like, it was like he was not in control of himself at all. That's why they successfully pulled an insanity defense for him.
Yeah. And probably, like, he is one of the few that has ever actually happened for. And we did that one recently, and as I was writing it, I had to leave a lot of shit out because it is, even though he did not kill a lot of people, he did some really, really awful things.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, oh God, I don't want to write that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's an interesting one. I think one of my favorite things about that story is that before all of this happened, he was like a favorite local babysitter for the children.
Yeah. Weird how that keeps happening with some of them. Like fucking John Wayne Gacy also kind of had that going on.
But you know what? It's the drag queens you got to look out for, I guess.
Yep. So let's see. Lecter was based on a single character that Harris met when he was interviewing an American prisoner in a Mexican hospital for the criminally insane when he was writing for Argosy. He was a guy named Dykes Askew Simmons. Simmons had made an attempt to escape and was shot in the legs by a guard. And Harris was at the hospital for this and saw that Simmons was being treated by a very peculiar doctor with mannerisms that Harris later cribbed for Lecter. And when he asked the hospital staff who that doctor was, they laughed and told him that he's an inmate there. In reality, he was a doctor named Alfredo Bali Trevino, who had murdered his boyfriend in a moment of rage and disposed of his dismembered body by burying him in his backyard. Unlike Lecter, however, he was haunted by this for the rest of his life.
Well, as one should be.
Yeah. Sean Connery was Demme's first pick for Lecter.
Oh, that would have been awful. I bet Sean Connery. Connery is a serial killer.
Yeah, there were also let's see, there were some weird names on that list. Christopher Lloyd was up for it at one point. Lou Gossett Jr. was also up for him at one point.
That's a no. It's not going to work.
Christopher
Lloyd, I could see maybe.
Yeah, it would have been, the vibe would have been off like crazy, and all I would have seen is Doc Brown.
His voice isn't right.
So the character of Jack Crawford is based on John Douglas, the founder of the Behavioral Science Unit at the FBI. He's one of the originators of the technique that everyone popularly calls criminal profiling, where a behavioralist looks at crime scene evidence, looks at the remains of victims, and draws conclusions about the murderer's identity and personality based on the evidence. Its efficacy is highly subject to debate.
They are not nearly as accurate as we have been led to believe.
No, it tends to be portrayed on TV and movies as like magic. Douglas is also one of the first people, along with Robert Ressler, to move the Bureau away from the term mass murderer and use the term serial killer to more accurately describe what they were investigating. Douglas consulted on the movie and worked closely with Scott Glenn to develop his character. And he even subjected him to the home recordings of the Toolbox Killers that he typically made applicants for the BSU listen to. I cannot fucking imagine. I've never even heard it. I cannot imagine how awful that is.
I have heard it.
No.
Not all of it, but I've heard some of it. There's a documentary about him, and they play big chunks of it because it was a significant part of the case and a significant part of the prosecution. But like, it's creepy as shit because he's such a fucking narcissist and like such a psychopath that it's really awful.
Yeah. Like Norris and Bittaker, was that their names? Anyway. At the time of the production, Douglas was actively investigating Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, who would elude the FBI for another 10 years. So
10 years?
Yep. Yeah, he was apprehended in 2001. I think they believe he killed 90 women.
Now, I think there's two ways to look at Gary Ridgway if you're his wife. One of the ways is, hey, look, you were married to a serial killer and that sucks. But if you're a glass half full kind of person, you can think, well, you married this guy and he stopped killing women for like 15 years. I would say it was a very successful marriage in a lot of ways.
Oh, no. This movie was made on a budget of $19 million. It ultimately took home $273 million in box office alone.
Damn.
Became such a cultural touchstone that it was being parodied straight into the next decade.
Still, I mean, you still find shit.
Yep. At the 64th Academy Awards, it was nominated for 7 awards and won 5, the major character categories.
I just remember Billy Crystal coming out on stage on that fucking stupid mask and the...
Yep. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Conversely, it was nominated for equivalent categories of the Golden Globes that year and the British Film Awards, and only won Best Actress and Best Actor and Actress, respectively.
And Betty Friedan disagreed with all of that. You just said.
Unsurprisingly, Gene Siskel did not like this movie.
God, eat a bag of dicks, Gene Siskel. God.
Yeah. But our man Raj, he loved it.
This actually was a bit polarizing critically.
Yeah.
A lot of people really liked it, but there were other people that were like, meh.
Huh.
I understand why.
Do you have reviews?
I do.
Okay.
Would you like to hear them?
I would love to hear them. Like to hear it.
Man.
Here it goes.
Like to hear it. Here it goes. I mean, for the most part, they're all kind of glowing. Let's see. Sheila Benson, Los Angeles Times. Although Crawford's search for Buffalo Bill and the Starling Lecter duel dominate the action, the film is dotted with real peripheral characters who give it a sense of authenticity. Cassie Lemons as Starling's supportive roommate, Ardelia. Paul Lazar as the sweetly friendly Smithsonian entomologist. Well, I don't know about sweetly friendly. He's a little bit creepy.
I love those guys.
Anthony Hand as Lecter's prideful jailer, the smarmy Dr. Chilton. And Ted Levine's terrifying Buffalo Bill, a.k.a. Jamie Gum. I grabbed this quote because I think there's something interesting to it. I don't know that I agree fully because I think people like Ardelia, who I think is a good character that she's not well used in this movie. And I think there's like, to say like, oh, it gives it authenticity. It's like, well, they're not really in it that much. So no, I don't know that it does give it authenticity.
Well, I think there might be something to that because really what's at the heart of this
that's why
movie,
I pulled it, because I was like, yes and no here.
Because what's at the heart of this is really a triangle between Clarice, Buffalo Bill, and Lecter primarily. And it without a series of like orbiting characters to sort of fill it out a little bit and give it a little bit of character, it would have been extremely sterile and clinical and like.
So that is my problem with this movie as a whole. I think as a narrative, it's not very good because it's trying to tell two stories that should be intersecting a lot, and they don't really intersect. They just kind of bump into each other once in a while. And that's why I finished it and I was like, that's what's bothering me is these things should be all flowing together at certain points and then pulling apart. And it never really does. They sort of just run parallel to each other.
I don't disagree with that. I think that might be like some of the reasons why I like my more critical points of the story is it is really kind of like she is kind of being pulled in both directions and they should sort of weave together a little bit more neatly. But it really is like you described where she investigates Buffalo Bill, and then she does Lecter, and they kind of go in two different directions. Then occasionally they kind of weave together briefly, and then she goes off in both directions again, and they kind of slam together a little bit later on, and then she kind of has this kind of revelation real late in the movie.
Yeah, because I think we hurtle to the end, and at the end it's like, well, what was all that other shit for then?
Because it definitely feels like there's the moment when she goes to Frederica Bimmel's place and realizes like what's going on, that feels like a moment where she should be there and the movie should end. But there's like 30 minutes of stuff still happening afterwards.
And I think this is a good script. I think it's a well-written movie. I actually don't think it's a good script. I think it is a well-written movie. And I think that that's really where it suffers. It's like you kind of get to the end and you're like, those should have been together more.
Yeah, which is wild. Ted Talley, who wrote this movie, he's a really, really good writer.
Yeah, he's got some big credits.
Yeah. He's written like 8 movies total.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that surprised me. I was like, this seems like he should have had more.
I know.
Let me see. So the Philadelphia Inquirer, here's another interesting one. Just as The Silence of the Lambs is about several forms of degradation, its genre, which I don't know that I agree with that, its genre has suffered the erosion that comes of numbing and often sickening repetition. Seeking to galvanize jaded audiences, each film has been a cut below its predecessor and has shown ever grosser mutilations. And this we'll get to, I think, in when we have the inevitable discussion about is it horror or not, because I think this is Desmond Ryan from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I think Desmond Ryan is assuming this is a horror movie. Thus, we have just run through the late 80s and into the late 80s with movies that have diminishing returns and not a lot of creativity to them. I don't see this movie as a horror movie, and that's why I think it's weird to be like, because I think this kicks off an era of dramatic thrillers, police procedurals, like throughout the 90s, we get a shitload of them. I mean, alongside a lot of like really crappy erotic thrillers.
Yeah.
But they're all informed very heavily by this. So to say this is the kind of end run of a slew of really brutal killer movies, I don't really see that this is the kind of bottom of the barrel.
Fuck no. No, this is, I think that.
And Desmond Ryan is not clear about why he thinks that. Like he does not make a strong case for that. I just think it was kind of interesting to say like this is the inevitable end of movies with diminishing quality.
I mean, this is a person who will probably appear later on also shitting on horror movies in their reviews, like when we turn up a review of something we do later on. And it's just people being shitty about horror movies, and particularly. This one drops, and it's not, and it is recognized. I think that this is 100% a horror movie. It is recognizably as such. I think that the discussion, the debate that happened afterwards, and it was sort of a direct result of the kind of critical reactions to this movie, because like, horror
well, it's
movies,
what we see with the prestige discussion now. It's like, oh, this one's important that it's horror because it's elevated horror. Which I have no use for these discussions anyway, because I'm like, call it whatever the fuck you want. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, because what ends up happening, like, this is a prestige movie with a fucking prestige cast and crew, and
they weren't really a prestige cast and crew yet. This movie kind of made them.
Actually, yeah. I'm jumping the gun there, really. It's just that it's a horror movie that doesn't look like a fucking horror movie.
Yeah, it's The Exorcist. It's made so well that you forget what you're watching.
And the fact that it infiltrated the Academy and it won it won very important Oscars, and it was Jodie Foster's like second Oscar in a row. It's the same. So like, let me give you an analogy. Like about 20 years ago when comic books started to enter the New York Times bestseller list.
Oh, you mean when they become graphic novels?
Yes. And so it's not, and I'm not talking about like The Dark Knight Returns and like Watchmen and like really kind of like prestige format books. I'm talking like 6-issue collections of X-Men or like of Justice League America, like just 6 issues of a regular comic book series. It's a book that, the critical appraisals of these are, comic books are for fucking children and idiots and stinky, adults. But
let me give you the broader context of that. It's when something goes from, it's like when horror went from being Frankenstein and Dracula to being goofy beach movies with monsters in them.
Yeah.
It's the reverse of that. It's when all of a sudden, then we go from that to The Exorcist into these more like things that are attracting. It's when they're no longer considered disposable trash.
Yeah.
They're no longer, like ephemera or what's the like kitsch, not kitsch. What's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't fucking matter. But it's when they become something more culturally valuable again. And people have a hard time making that switch. I have no use for that switch because I think no culture is disposable and all of these things are relevant to everybody. And so that's why I have no use for this argument about like, is it horror if it's not? I don't know. Shit crosses genres all the time. It's like, well, is it fantasy or is it sci-fi? It's like, it's all fake. Who fucking cares?
No, but like, that's the whole thing. Is like serious film goers were like, wait a minute. I don't watch horror movies.
Right. It's validating when someone calls it that. It's validating when someone says, oh, your comic books are actually graphic novels. They're not for children. Your horror movie is now winning Oscars. It's like, take it or don't take. I don't fucking care. I like it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, ultimately, this fucking debate is stupid.
I don't need the validation. I think there's
it's meaningless.
There's a much bigger conversation about this movie and about controversy around this movie that I think is more valuable to have.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I put that question out there to several channels and I got like hundreds of responses from people. And I was expecting it to sort of list hard in one direction or the other. And what I found was that among like 300 responses between like fucking YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, the ratio was like 2 to 1.5 yes over no. So like that spread, that margin was much narrower than I was expecting it to be.
I mean, to me, it just falls into like movies like Seven and Shutter Island and Like they're just.
Oh yeah, but those
they're
movies
kind of
probably would not exist without this one. This was the test
this
case.
or like shit like Copycat. Those are a little bit lower quality, but like Bone Collector, movies that are like real edgy cop dramas or like cop melodramas. That's sort of what I lump this in with. It's like, it's not. So every time this question comes up, it's like, is a thing a horror movie? And again, I have very little use for this, but I always think about, I think it was that podcast Ruined that I was listening to.
Yeah.
And the way that they defined it was, is this movie designed to scare you? Is that the explicit intention of this movie? Because that is what a horror movie is. It is supposed to scare you. And I think that's a pretty good baseline. Is like, this is a thing that is supposed to inspire fear in you. And this movie is not frightening. It has tension. It's thrilling at certain points.
Menacing as hell. And it is very, very oppressive. Like right down to the...
But you always know what's going to happen. It's not like anything is going to like jump out and scare you.
Oh,
or
sure,
like,
sure.
But like, this is because it is a police procedural, because it's kind of based on a real thing. It's based on several real things, but... and so that's why I don't really consider it that. But that doesn't affect how I would view it either way. I just...
No, I mean, I identified like several criteria for sort of qualifying as a horror movie, and a lot of it I think can cross over into other genres as well. So it's not really valid. But like it's like, do we have monsters? We've got 2 monsters, as a matter of fact. We've got. Does it have spectacle? Like, yes, there is violent, gory shit all up and down this fucking movie.
Oh, really? I think there's only one scene in this movie where I was just kind of like, oh, God.
Oh, no, it's just only because we've seen some shit. And like by comparison, like this is a comfortably R-rated movie, but yeah.
But I also don't, but like the whole monster thing, I don't take to that idea. Like, I'm not someone who's like, these are evil people, because I don't believe in evil. I don't believe in monsters. I think people are just, you make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are real fucking terrible, and you find ways to justify them.
Yeah, but then do we have like there needs to be a sort of a set of values that our hero adheres to, and the monster that like has to outclass her and be sort of like not beholden to those same values, and that's kind of like why it's so hard to catch these guys, is because they've got this fucking unidentifiable, just completely alien set of values that makes them move invisibly. So now I think that's where the movie really fails, though. Is that the thing about serial killers, well, about some serial killers, the ones that sort of get away for a long time, is that they are particularly adept at hiding themselves and hiding what they are. And in these movies, and that they usually do that with like charm. They have a certain charm to them. And in this movie, neither of these killers is charming. They are both extremely off-putting from the moment you meet them. You do not want to be around them. No. But I do like Lecter, but no, I would not want to fucking hang out with him.
Oh, because he's fucking mean. Like, he's like, even though you're like, oh, he has a certain Southern charm, he's also really shitty and like rude.
Yeah. But,
and the other one's just creepy as hell.
Oh yeah. But also another thing that like kind of makes these guys so hard to catch is when they do it on TV, when they do it in movies, they have to condense the timeline in order to sort of fit it into a feature-length film. These guys often wait like a year or years between their actual killings, right? So,
not all of them, though. Some of them are just like, well, it's Tuesday. And the other reason first of all, we should just say up top here, it's really fucking hard to solve crimes, especially murders. It's real hard.
Yeah, particularly when the motive is like just so fucking
when you would have no idea what it was. I mean, that's why it was really, really hard before they started up all of this sort of profiling thing, is it never occurred to anybody that such a person could exist. Which is why people got away with serial murder for so long, is they were just like, nobody would ever do that. It's the same reason why women got away with murder for so long, because they could never believe that a woman could kill somebody.
Yeah.
It just was not in their nature. And it's like, well, if you weren't so fucking stupid, you might have caught them a lot sooner. And that actually is the other reason why they get away with things for very long, is because a lot of cops just don't try very hard. And I am not saying that flippantly. I am saying that as someone who cranks these fucking stories out day after day. I can assure you there are lots of cops who do try very hard and get very invested and really genuinely want to catch killers for the right reasons. There are just as many who just don't try very hard and try to pin it on somebody else. And that is a sad reality.
Oh, man.
But let's get back to the reviews, because that was a derailment that I wasn't expecting.
Christ. Yeah, okay.
So the last one is, I think this one kind of sums up, as much as I hate to agree with Vincent Canby as often as I do, I think this one kind of sums it up. But it's a bit of a long quote, so bear with me. It says, Miss Foster and Mr. Hopkins are so good, in fact, that Clarice and Hannibal sometimes seem more important than the mechanics of The Silence of the Lambs, which is, otherwise, committed to meeting the obligations of a suspense melodrama. Mr. Demme meets most of these obligations with great style. Eventually, though, the demands of the plot begin to take precedence over people and plausibility. Hannibal not only can help with the Buffalo Bill case, but he also knows who Buffalo Bill is. About halfway through, so does the audience, at which point the movie shifts to a lower, more functional gear, even as the pace increases. This is exactly how I felt about
Jesus
this movie.
Christ, I fucking hate, I hate this, but I'm over here going, that is objectively true.
You get like halfway through the movie, you feel like they all got halfway through the movie and they were like, oh, we got to wrap this shit up.
Well, that's what I said. Like, it gets to a point where like this story is basically told, but we still got to have a Buffalo Bill dance.
Yeah.
We've got to have like the kind of the fake out. We got to there's like a full half an hour between like the moment where she figures it out and the fucking moment she shoots him.
And then when it kicks into high gear, you're sort of just like, well, what was all that other stuff for?
Yeah. Then? I mean, ultimately, this is a movie that is carried by its characters.
Yes.
So
I think that's why Jonathan Demme doesn't get a lot of credit for it, is because as a director, I don't know that this is a very I think it's a competently directed film. I think Tak Fujimoto should get a lot of fucking credit.
The way that he makes this movie look is a lot of the appeal for me as well, because like,
yes,
I love a bright, candy-colored horror movie that's like splashy and gory and gross and nasty with like very, big pronounced killers, but like this is not that. This is a serial killer thing. And the vibe that I always got from like reading those old true crime stories was like gray skies and trees with no leaves on them and everything.
And I mean, it takes place in the Rust Belt, and you feel that.
Yeah.
You see it. He really brings you there, and you feel it, you see it.
The environment is nasty and it weighs on you. And like, if this
it's dark, it's poor,
yeah.
it is Appalachia,
Yeah. Like if this movie looked any other way, I don't think it would work the way that it does. And
right. And so I think Tak Fujimoto should get a lot of credit for that. And because I think as a director, Jonathan Demme's competent here. It's a finely directed movie, but I don't think he goes above and beyond. I think actually a lot of the mistakes could be attributed to bad direction.
I don't know. I've got a couple of points that when we get to the plot, I'll point them out. There's one thing in particular that he does that is like some film nerd shit, but
yeah,
it's like one of my favorite qualities of it. But
I mean, there's also like there's some Deus Ex moments in this where I'm like, I guess it was the only way you could do it. You can't write your way out of this. So,
but I mean, also this script follows the novel pretty closely. So
I'm pretty sure I read it. Because I remember reading it. I think I read all of them like back to back at one point. And
yeah, I read it when I was working at the psychiatric hospital. Yeah, it was just there. It was just laying around in the nurse's station. I was like, hey, Silence of the Lambs. I read this.
So as much as I didn't, Vincent Canby is a stuffy bitch most of the time, but like he was a really good critic, and he was usually, I think, pretty right about things. And it's a fair review. He doesn't say that it's bad. He just basically says like, we are given this character-driven drama that's really good, and then all of a sudden they just sort of kick it into high gear and race to the end.
Yeah. There's one more quality of this movie that we got to fucking address.
It's got about 8 pages on it, so.
Yeah, this movie, as much as I love it, I must acknowledge that it is stereotypically homophobic. It is transphobic before it was all the rage these days.
Yep.
It is like,
this new J.K. Rowling movie is rough.
It is a very unfortunate quality of the movie, and I thought about this a lot this week as I've prepared for this episode, because like we've talked about this in other movies that we've done that sort of like toe that.
Yeah, this one goes hard at it though.
That toes that fucking line where it's like Harris was like, well, how do I make this character really, really freaky? How do I make him weird? And so he fucking
this is Brian De Palma levels of exploitation.
Yeah. And so he's like, I know, he thinks he's a transvestite or a transsexual. And so fucking here we are.
So Jonathan Demme, he, I think, was very offended and very upset that people accused him of that. And he really rejected it. He said that Buffalo Bill, he's not gay or trans.
These are like contemporary. These are contemporary reactions, because I've also read more recent ones where he's like, I do really actually regret that.
Well, that's not actually what he says. He says something like that. So he said he's a tormented man who hates himself and wants to transform into like the furthest thing from what he is. And so obviously I guess that's a woman. And so he kind of softens a little bit on this in the years to follow in a way that's sort of like, okay, I get where your argument, because this movie upset a lot of gay people, and it very much upset trans people. It upset a lot of women as well, for obvious reasons. And he kind of was like, I think I understand where you're coming from, but I stand by my position. And it's like, dude, for fuck's sake.
I know this goes back to some of the things that we've also said about like the way that ultimately what you mean as an artist when you put something out does not fucking matter, because you're opening it up to public interpretation, and people are going to fucking project their own experiences on it. So you can be like, you could go at it like, well, no, he's not really this trans person. He's just a tormented person. It's like, it doesn't fucking matter. The people who are gay and are trans who are watching this are like, wait a second, what the fuck?
And so here's a little PSA. I'm going to hit y'all with a little PSA. And this is generally for privileged people, specifically people who create things. When a person, especially a marginalized person, says that you have done something or said something to offend or hurt them, the right answer is never going to be, no, I didn't. How dare you suggest that?
God damn it. Everybody's so PC and woke now.
Don't say that. Take 5 seconds and think, maybe they're right. Are they right? And if you do think about it and you still feel justified, fine. But if your instinct is to say absolutely not, you're probably wrong and should shut the fuck up. Now, I think even if we gave Jonathan Demme the benefit of the doubt that he meant no harm, and I don't think that he did.
No, because he actually strikes me as a pretty decent dude. Like,
well, especially since the next feature film he makes is Philadelphia.
That's the thing. I feel almost like he made that movie as a reaction to the criticism of this,
which is not okay. But
well, I mean, almost like in his head, he's like, "I'm gonna make up for it." Right. I have not seen that movie since it came out, so I can't tell you if he.
There are problems with it, but it's more or less based on a true story. So. But the thing about this movie, and we've watched movies like Sleepaway Camp where queer themes and gender are used as a source of shock. Like, the movie is not being homophobic. It's not telling you one thing or another. It's just exploitation. This is more in the vein of something like Dressed to Kill, which conceives of a trans identity that is an expression of mental illness, or something that, it explicitly pathologizes trans people. And it is in the dialogue. Like, there is a moment where Lecter is describing Buffalo Bill and with regard to gender, and he says he thinks he's a transsexual, but his pathology is 1,000 times more savage. And that phrasing alone implies that transgendered people are violent and dangerous. And this fits within a longer historical arc wherein Hollywood has portrayed queer people as villainous or as sick or as silly since the Hays Code, and then well after. I mean, even through right now, we still see it. And so, it's one thing for Jonathan Demme to come out and say, I didn't intend for that. And it's like, yeah, but you're not creating this in a vacuum.
Yeah. That's what I was just saying.
Our dear President Kamala Harris said, you didn't just fall out of a coconut tree. All right, Jonathan Demme, you didn't fall out of the coconut tree.
Yeah, it's just what I was just saying. It's like, it doesn't matter what you bring to it. It's what everybody else brings to it, right?
And it's particularly, or it probably feels particularly egregious because this is coming at a time when there is a growing body of research that suggests the exact opposite, that trans people are typically the victims of violence. They are not the ones perpetrating violence. It's also coming at a time. This is the peak of the AIDS crisis, where like the government is turning a blind eye to a staggering number of deaths. And so there is a lot of protests around this movie. And, even if he didn't mean any harm. This movie is really ambiguous and wishy-washy about gender in a way that feels like plausible deniability to me.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, well, if we never actually say it, and it's like, but again, given this kind of framing that, in which transness is conceived in this film as something pathological and as dangerous, it really just perpetuates this narrative. Like, even if we say, well, he's tormented and it's all that, it's like, well, this just perpetuates that narrative that trans people are just confused about their gender.
Yeah.
And then that just reinforces this idea that it is, again, part of a mental illness, which it is obviously not. And so, it gets runs up against a lot of protests. And this was not that new. I mean, queer activism around films has, since Cruising in 1980, there was like Cruising, there was Windows, those two movies generated a shitload of protests. This was relatively light, compared to those movies. Yeah. But then like Basic Instinct comes out right after that, also generates a ton of protests around the way that bisexuality is portrayed, because obviously, spoiler alert, killer in that movie is a bisexual person. So it's like, it just fits in this lineage of Hollywood villainizing queer people in a way that is kind of dangerous and reckless.
Yeah.
And I think what's really awful about this is that this all could have been avoided. If they had taken a day to just do a little bit of reading, they would have known this and could have avoided all of this.
Right. Because, I mean, ultimately, end of the day, like, you could have done anything with you could have kept the woman's suit. You could have kept that kind of arc of his character, but sort of changed the origin in a way it didn't have to fucking be there. He could have had like mother issues or something like that. Like it didn't. I mean,
because they're trying to root this in reality, and if you do that, it is fair to say a lot of this misogyny that motivates serial murder is rooted in shit like that. Like, it is rooted in misogyny. It's rooted in issues with, mother figures and authority and shit like that. So you could have said, that's where we're coming from. You didn't need to make it this thing that also villainizes queer people, because isn't it also a little bit creepy that they think this? And you know what the answer is? No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not, if you're not some fucking lunatic who thinks about shit like that all the time.
Yeah. Matters were not helped that like 6 months after this movie was released, Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested.
Yeah, but you know what? Hey, every once in a while, a serial killer is a gay man, but 97%, literally 97% of the time, they're not. No. So, like, it's that kind of thing where it's like, oh, right, and these people are real gross too, aren't they? And like, you didn't have to do that. No. And so that's why when I'm a little, I don't have a lot of sympathy when someone's just like, oh, well, I didn't mean that. It didn't intend to do that. It's like, but didn't you?
Yeah.
You didn't have to make this character that. You could have learned 5 seconds that you were actually maligning trans people in this way. And like, it wouldn't have been that hard for Thomas Harris to not do it, because it is also in the book. And it wouldn't have been that hard for the people who made this movie, because, they could have avoided all of this had they just taken a little bit of time to educate themselves instead of using these sort of like ugly, reckless tropes for their, motive.
Yeah.
And that's a little fucked. And I think in retrospect, that's one of the things that really drags this movie down, is like your cruel disinterest in the pain of others kind of shows through in this movie. And that's what makes it age not so great. In an otherwise, sort of stellar film where people are really giving it their all.
Right. It's rooted in a time when just like nobody was fucking thinking. And even the people who you would consider to be like the good guys still fucking like didn't really spare a fucking thought. And like it takes them like 30 years to kind of look back on their life and go, oh shit. Or at least you hope that they fucking reach that point.
Right, because these are the ones that are just like, well, I don't use the N-word, so I'm liberal. And it's like, Jesus Christ, is that your fucking baseline? Like, the idea that you wouldn't... And I think that's the part that I find a little bit galling is through all of this, because I didn't come out at this time. I came out a couple of years after this, though, 5 or so years after this. And it's the idea that people would be like, well, we didn't know. And it's like, no, you didn't know because you didn't want to know.
Yeah.
you avoided knowing because it made you uncomfortable. So like, whether it's parents or teachers or, counselors, whatever the fuck it was, for people to be like, well, the times were different. Well, that's a really shitty response because the times actually weren't that different. It was on the news all the time. It was in your face all the time. You just didn't want to engage with it because of what it said about you. And that's a really fucking terrible thing to say to victims. And to say to marginalized people is be like, I'm sorry, your trauma and pain made me uncomfortable. So instead, we just made you the villain in the movie because, it's how the 90s were.
Yeah.
And that's real fucked. And that's why, I'm watching this and I'm like, this movie feels super dated. But you'd still see it now. It's not like we don't still get this shit. It's literally on the news now for the same reason. Because, hey, let's be honest, the Republicans just keep fucking recycling the same playbook.
Oh, yeah, they got 3 jokes. And 2 of them are about gender.
Yeah. And so it's just kind of like, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt because this is very much a product of its time. And it didn't have to be. It's not necessary in the story.
Yeah.
And
it's
think,
like I say,
this
it's
is
like
a
I say
movie
about
that,
other, we've said this about other movies recently. Like if you change one detail about this movie or you remove it outright entirely, the movie remains the same. And that's a quality of it that they could have done anything else. But it's like Thomas Harris wrote it being like, oh, this is going to be fucked up. And then Jonathan Demme looked at it and was like, oh, this is going to be fucked up and it's going to be great for a movie. And it's really unfortunate.
And it just never occurs to them that like, oh, these are real people that we are maligning in our film. All you had to do was go ask one trans person how they felt about this. And they'd be like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
And there were actually a lot of gay people that were like, whatever, it's not like, it's like that was sort of the least of their concerns at that point. Yeah. Because there were 2 sides to this argument. And it should also be said that in a lot of these protests, especially when it came to kind of gay rights activism throughout the 80s and the 90s, a lot of these protests were by people who had not actually seen the movie because the movie hadn't come out yet. And so a lot of it, and I have a really hard time when people protest things that they've not seen or heard or read.
Well, I heard it was terrible.
Yeah, I remember I had a friend of mine who we were talking about when Cruising came out, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I went to all these protests." She was very active in the Boston gay rights movement, and she was like, "Yeah, I went to that one, I went to this one," and I was like, "Have you seen Cruising?" And she was like, "No."
Oh no.
I was like, "So you went out and protested something you haven't even seen?" It's like that's people getting caught up in a movement. And I think there are legitimate reasons to protest Cruising. I personally don't find it that offensive. I see why people did. But you got to at least see it.
Sure.
So there is a kind of, I don't want to say devil's advocate, but a lot of the protest was by people who had not seen the movie, but they would have been justified had they seen it. So. Yeah. There you have it, everybody. This is definitely, there's no hedging on this one. This is just homophobia and transphobia. And I think the homophobia gets a little bit overlooked, and rightfully so, but it is also in there.
Because eventually it's the sort of notion of Buffalo Bill's gender that kind of takes over eventually.
Yeah, and I think there's also a case to be made that this is sort of an anti-feminist movie as well. I mean, there's a lot of weird gender stuff with Clarice where and I think that's, again, more just a product of the time, but there's a little bit there too.
Yeah, it was feminist by 1991 standards.
It's like
I'm helping.
It really is. It's this idea, and this again, it feels unfair a lot of the time to be like, well, it's because it's all made by men, but it really is. It's an issue of men thinking they're right all the time, where they're just like, we're making this strong female character, and it's like, is she strong? Really?
Right.
Or are you really just sort of like writing what you think is a strong woman?
Oh yeah,
but who is constantly demurring to everybody else.
Right. Yeah, that'll be all, Joss Whedon.
Yeah, exactly. It has a little bit of that to it. But hey, otherwise, fucking fantastic.
Yeah, shall we talk about it?
Let's do it.
All right. So we open on the foggy woods near FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. Clarice Starling runs the ropes course on the trails by the headquarters, climbing over obstacles, making good time running, when she's suddenly called off the track by a superior.
Yeah, speak of the devil. Hey, you know what this opening reminds us of? reminds us that even ladies can be FBI agents, but only if they practice a lot and sweat real hard. Because God damn it, she is soaking wet. It is alarming.
It's hard work, man. She's gonna.
I want to say it's. I think it's hyperhidrosis is what it's called.
Yeah. Jack Crawford, head of the behavioral sciences unit, would like to see her.
I love what I love in this moment is that they send some guy out in the woods to find her, and it's just like, just go. She's in the woods. Just go find her. Go get her. She's in the woods. Yeah. It's like, how does he know where she is? She's just jogging through the woods.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's just that long, like it's just from like front to back, about 0.1 miles. You just go out there, you'll find her. You'll see her. She's the one sweating.
But we get in this, even in this opening moment, and I do think that this movie does a very good job of showing Clarice as an other in this very masculine world.
Oh shit, yeah! Like, I mean, they're about to do it hardcore in a couple of scenes on her way to Crawford's office.
Yeah, I mean, they do it in this moment. Like, she is getting stared at all the time. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's because she's fucking soking wet. But like,
all the guys aren't like, "Hey, it's a lady FBI agent." They're like, "Holy shit, she's sweating a lot."
Like, do you need a fucking towel? What? Do you have other clothes with you? Yeah. But yeah, there's that is a constant theme, and I think generally it is done very well. But I think it is also there's some of it that's unintentional that comes through just as hard.
Yeah. On our way to his office, we get to lay the land. She's a small woman in a program dominated by men. Evident in the scene where she gets into an elevator packed with dudes who are like towering over her. When she arrives, she's there before Crawford and takes the time to look over the bulletin board covered in grisly crime scene photos, notes, and...
Yeah, hey, do they really just have just like disgusting pictures up in their office all the time?
Geez, I don't know. I can't really say. Maybe?
Because I occasionally have to go through reports and shit, and like, I will speed past those pictures where I'm like, yep, that's a dead lady.
Oh no.
Keep going. I don't just pin them up to the wall.
It's all evidence related to Jack's latest case, the hunt for a killer the Bureau is calling Buffalo Bill. So when Crawford arrives, he announces her credentials. She's a student, but she's one of the best in the Bureau's training program and came in from a double major undergraduate program at the top of her class. So she's just an achiever.
Mm.
Yeah. As they talk, Demme shoots them both straight. So this is what I was talking about. This is one of his sort of director traits that I think is fucking amazing. He shoots them straight on, or at least he shoots the person talking to Clarice straight on.
And I think this is it is because he does it throughout the movie, and it is very effective every single time.
And he's consistent about it. It's like he watched an Errol Morris documentary and was like, "Oh shit, I'm doing that."
Yeah.
Because when
do you think it was? Is it
Thin Blue Line?
Oh, I was gonna say, was it Vernon, Florida? Well,
yeah, that was the one.
Then he got the office job and he bought that car. I don't see him very much anymore.
Yeah. But the difference is when he shoots Clarice, she does not look straight on. He shoots her straight on, but her eye line is kind of like off camera. So she's not talking to you because the whole fucking point of this is he's putting you in her place. So you experience this scene from Clarice's point of view. I think it works like crazy. I love it.
Yeah, and he uses this to really good effect in various points and for various reasons. Like there's going to be a moment later on when she's talking to Hannibal Lecter that he uses this same technique to show us that they are sort of opposite sides of the same coin type of thing.
Oh, right, with the reflections?
Yeah, it's really fucking cool.
Yeah. So Crawford tasks Clarice in this point after visiting a hospital for the criminally insane in Maryland. The Behavioral Sciences Division is conducting interviews with incarcerated killers in order to help build more accurate profiles of killers in the wild. And a killer at that institution has since eluded him. Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal the Cannibal, Clarice muses.
Yeah, he describes this as doing an errand for her. And I thought, well, this errand sounds suspiciously like dangerous and mentally scarring work. Yeah. How about you hire her and pay her a salary, you fuck? This Jack Crawford's a piece of shit.
It's the most diabolical internship of all time.
It really is. It's like, this is the fucking case study for why interns should be paid.
I know. You might get jizz thrown on you.
Yeah. Oh, God. So that scene is as effective as ever.
Oh boy, never gets any easier. At the hospital, Clarice meets with Lecter's keeper, a guy named Dr. Chilton, a pompous and incompetent doctor who spares no opportunity to hit on Clarice.
Yep. And then, but she asks him about Dr. Lecter, and he says, "Oh, he's a monster, a pure psychopath."
Yeah.
And he starts talking about him like he's a prized pig.
Oh yeah, he says, what does he say? It's so rare to catch one alive.
Yes, in the wild.
Yeah.
And he has the biggest teeth I've ever seen.
And his hair,
He's like that.
His hair is stacked like 5 feet high.
He was on a show. It was on that show Boston Public.
Yeah.
And he plays. I don't really remember that show very well. I used to watch it with Adam's mother a lot.
Wait, was that the one with William Shatner?
No, I can't.
Oh, I'm
remember
thinking of
who else
Boston
was on
Legal.
it.
Never mind.
And he plays a sort of similarly unsettling character in that, where you're just like, all I can see is this smarmy piece of shit. And he reminds me of that guy, the upper crust guy from Family Guy, who has the giant teeth.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that. It's the biggest teeth I've ever seen.
Yeah. So he's going down all of Lecter's remarkable qualities. He's extremely intelligent, resourceful, and very dangerous. In 1981, he faked a heart attack and was taken to an infirmary for tests. When the opportunity presented itself, he attacked the nurse attending to him, doing something horrible to her, depicted on a photograph that we'd never see.
Yeah, here's my question. Does Dr. Chilton just carry around this picture of some mangled woman everywhere he goes? Why does he have it like in his wallet?
Apparently he does, because he just pulls it out of his fucking jacket.
Yeah, he says, "Joe, did you want to see?"
He's like, yeah, I keep it on me. I like to look at it every now and then.
There's in this moment when I don't know if they're in an elevator or whatever, there's this really interesting low drone in the back. That's
Yeah.
super
The sound
unsettling.
design in this was like fucking all sourced from like submarines and shit like that, because they want you to feel like you are underground. And man, it's like a dungeon.
Why are they in like a Victorian era dungeon?
Yeah, it's like a jail spelled with a G.
Listen, I have had to visit a lot of jails. I have had to visit a lot of psychiatric hospitals in my previous professional life.
They don't look like this.
Never have they been in some dark, dank basement.
Nope. The block of cells that keep Lecter is a stone-walled dungeon, which presumably keeps the prison's worst patients, including a freakish little guy named Miggs, who can, and I quote, smell your cunt. Yep. When Clarice finds Lecter, his cell is unlike the others. His is a well-lit cell with a wall of plexiglass between him and Clarice. Lecter is first seen standing perfectly still and upright in the center of his cell. Up to this point...
And then he wants to know what Miggs said to her, and she says that he could smell a cunt, and he goes, "I myself cannot." And I thought, well, that's nice. I mean, I don't know if that's something you say, but... He does. When they first sort of open on him, he just sort of looks like a gross basset hound. Like he's like a little bit saggy.
He's a little droopy.
Like he does. He does come across. Okay, so was it Huckleberry Hound or no? Droopy Dog. Droopy Dog's voice was actually, I believe, modeled after Truman Capote. And so there is maybe a bit of a. Maybe not a 1-to-1, but like a 1 to a half a 1.
Yeah. Up to this point, we've been led to believe that he's a wild animal, but what we get is a quiet, well-mannered, middle-aged man who immediately pegs Clarice as a student.
Yeah, you get like Southern genteel faggy. That's what he is.
Yeah, he's really playing like American aristocracy.
Sure. Yeah. If that's what you need to call it, fine.
So, at one point he sort of like cranes his head up and like takes a whiff, and his sense of smell is so keen that he can name
l'air du temps.
Yeah, he names the perfumes that she had worn in the recent past.
Which I think that shit is so cheesy.
They do it. They really, really drive it to maximum effect in Hannibal, the next movie. But that movie is like a fucking comic book. This is way different. They're getting along well until she awkwardly introduces Crawford's questionnaire. Then they banter some more until Lecter remarks that Crawford must have sent her because he's too busy tracking the latest killer on the FBI's radar, Buffalo Bill.
This is around the time when he's like, you know what you look like with your good bag and your cheap shoes?
You look like a rube.
It's like, girl, you are ruthless. Jesus.
Yep. Yeah, so Lecter seems to like the way that she's so forthcoming. Like, that's the whole thing, is she's just like immediately vulnerable to him, and there's something about that he likes.
And I what I like about this moment is that she, sort of right when she sits down, she kind of clocks what he is, just like he clocks what she is, and they both respond in the most appropriate way. Like, she knows, okay, here's how I can get what I want from him, by being kind of radically honest and having no reservations. And he responds very well to it. It's when she doesn't that he doesn't respond. And I like that they do it like she doesn't hesitate, because we're supposed to understand that she is this sort of golden child at the FBI.
Yep. Yeah,
of course, it's 1991 and she's a woman, so she probably wasn't. But
no, the implication here is it's what you were talking about earlier, and they're going to do it with the reflections in the glass, is that she is every bit as like smart and resourceful and sort of intuitive as he is, but she's not she's not the monster. She's not going to fucking eat somebody. She's the one who
he is cunning where she is strategic.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, and also the way that like when they both sort of recognize each other, that's when they both sort of become a little antagonistic toward one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She challenges him and he sends the questions back out to her in the sliding drawer. And this is where we get a census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti, which...
Why does he say
it that way? He's a cultured man. It's Chianti.
Yeah. He'll have the pasta fagioli. Like, why are you talking like that? Yeah.
Yeah. So
I probably don't like that line just because it's become such a fucking cultural joke, but like,
yeah, right. It's because he does that
stupid
sound effect afterward. It's the one that everybody fucking was doing impressions of in 1991.
And it also, it seems inauthentic to the character because, again, the character is supposed to be this sort of Southern gentleman, and he kind of slums it every once in a while. And there are times when
is
they
Baltimore
do it,
the South? Like, is Maryland the South technically?
No,
that's where he's from.
He's playing, he's doing that sort of like Savannah gentleman, North Carolina kind of gentleman.
Oh, because when he does the accent, he's mocking her.
Right. But he is supposed to have this kind of gentility, I think. And sometimes he does it to sort of throw her off her game. But then in that moment, it's like, he's not throwing her off her game. It just seems like a weird acting choice.
Yeah.
But whatever. It is made for a lot of cultural moments. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Then he sends her away. On her way out, Miggs throws semen at Starling as she passes. Gross as ever, never gets any better.
So I will tell you, I watched this film with my boyfriend who had never seen it before.
No, how is that possible?
I mean, he'd never heard of Taxi Driver before. So.
What?
Well, he didn't watch horror movies.
Oh, okay. He's a sheltered boy.
Well, he was afraid of the leprechaun, I told you.
I'm the leprechaun, Garth.
He also was afraid of vampires, that they were going to come in his bedroom.
You don't gotta expose him. You don't gotta. Don't do it like that.
I'm just telling all your laundry over here, just airing it all.
I'm so sorry, Michael.
Everybody's gonna know now. Everybody's gonna know. But he was, I think, genuinely shook by this moment to the point where he had his shirt pulled up over his face.
Totally understandable.
Which is understandable. It is real gross.
It is. Yep.
It is the wrong context for that scene.
Oh, God.
And it really works in a horrible way.
Yeah, right. And it sets the whole fucking block off. They go nuts. And Lecter calls her back very urgently. And what he does is he apologizes to her, and for the transgression, he gives her some clues, some vague
Now
clues.
look, this is later on when she comes in from the rain, he's going to give her a towel. This was the moment to give her a towel.
Oh, God. Yeah. But a key thing of Hannibal Lecter's personality is he hates rudeness. That's what sort of draws him to kill people.
Which is interesting because he's cunty to her every single time.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. He's a narcissist. He can be as rude as he wants. I guess. Won't be eating himself.
It's not rude. It's a joke. The Homer Simpson quote. Well, it's cute when I do it.
Oh, yeah. Boy, is that number 3?
I hope so.
Boy. On our way back to the car, Clarice has a memory of being a little girl and greeting her father as he got home from work, a police officer in West Virginia.
They're going to do these flashbacks a couple times, and they are fucking seamless when they drop them in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It is really cool.
Very, very, very well done.
Yeah, I love that when she gets into her car and like they make a point of lingering on the fact that it's a beat up car.
Yeah.
Because her class status plays a big role in this character. Mm-hmm. And I think it could have come across real kind of heavy handed. And they do a pretty good job of showing that like she is from a impoverished background, and she's still, because she is a student, essentially, she still has that, like, she's still poor.
Yeah, with her good bag and her cheap shoes.
Her cheap shoes.
Yeah. The scene where Clarice is crying it out at her car wasn't in the script.
Yeah, because some guy just threw cum in her face.
Jodie consulted with an FBI agent named Mary Krause, who told her that she cried all the goddamn time. They deal with the worst criminals operating on a national level. Shit's traumatic on the daily. So, of course, she cries. The guys.
Yeah, listen, I worked for a long time on an intensive treatment team with the most difficult cases of mental illness. And you spend your entire day listening to people tell you the fucking worst stories you've ever heard, like the worst things that can happen to people. And you're just supposed to be like, well, 6 o'clock, it's time to go home and make dinner.
Oh, dude, yeah. When I worked at the hospital for that year at that psychiatric hospital ruined my life for like 5 years. I couldn't sleep. I had terrible indigestion all the fucking time. I had nightmares and shit. It was awful. It fucking sucked.
Yeah, and so like now, I'm sure their job is exponentially worse. It's like people who have to, like cops who have to like monitor social media and shit like that for like child pornography. And they have to like actively watch that shit. Like I cannot imagine a harder job than that.
Yeah. The guys in the FBI who didn't let it all out burned out horrendously. The very beginning of John Douglas's book, Mindhunter, is all about how the job of hunting killers who kill for pleasure nearly killed him.
Yeah,
so you know what? Let it all out.
It also opens. That's the moment when the book, I believe, opens right after Ed Kemper is essentially threatening to murder him.
Yeah.
And he has like he has a heart attack and has like a nervous breakdown.
Yes, that's a good book. That's a very interesting read.
Yeah, he's a bit of a narcissist too.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, for fuck's sake, his job is dealing with the worst narcissists on earth, and you know.
Yeah, well, if you want to catch a narcissist, you got to get in the mind of a narcissist.
Back at Quantico, Clarice continues her studies while researching Lecter, searching for anything related to the clue that Lecter dropped on her. She receives a call from Crawford informing her that Miggs, the jizz thrower, is dead, and that somehow Lecter is responsible for his death.
What is she supposed to do with that information?
You're not supposed to do anything.
How that doesn't help.
I know.
It doesn't help the situation. Like, hey, that guy who threw cum in your face, well, now he's dead too. And it's like, that doesn't make it better.
Yeah, and I mean, not just that somehow Hannibal Lecter, the guy that she was just talking to, talked him into it.
Yeah, I don't like that either, because it's like he's a real monster. He talked him into biting his own tongue off. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I watched a lot of the outtakes and extended scenes that are on that Criterion disc. This movie is so much better off for leaving a lot of that stuff out. This seems like a bit of that shit that probably should have gotten trimmed, because a lot of the stuff that hit the cutting room floor was really silly. Like it would have just like kicked this into comedy territory.
This movie could have gone over pretty easily.
Yep.
Because so she gets the Hester Moffat.
Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, she figures this whole thing out, this whole mystery. And like, this is the first part where I was like, all right, this feels like a little bit of a reach that she would figure this out on her own.
I don't know. I mean, she's a very smart, like a gifted detective.
And then in her spare time, she decodes all of the
anagrams,
Zodiac letters. You know, it's that shit where it's like, you don't have to make her a superhero, just because she's a woman. And I think that's what bugged me a little bit, is like, she could just be a really good FBI agent, not be a really good FBI agent for a woman. And that I find a little like, oh, come on.
I don't know. I didn't get that. I think like my whole thing is like, I mean, Jodie Foster's just selling this idea that like she is just she's just good at this.
She is, but her gender plays such a big part in this character.
Okay.
That it's sort of like, she doesn't have to be a superhero too. Like, she could collaborate. And maybe that's an opportunity to bring in those other characters that are like, that kind of bring the story to life.
Okay.
She has a roommate who is also an agent in training.
Yeah,
like,
okay. That's really too bad, because that character has a much larger role in the book, and she would have been much more interesting if they had just spared her a little bit more than they gave her.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what I mean, is there's going to be moments throughout this story where it's like, here's your Deus Ex ballerina moment, where it's like, she wouldn't have found that shit. Come on.
Oh, right, with the pictures and the thing.
Yes,
right,
and it's like you could have done a little bit more, and that's where it always feels to me like it falls short a little bit.
Right. Yeah,
but that's just
that thought always does occur to me. We'll save it. When I get there, like whenever that scene happens, I'm like, now why the fuck did she think to do that? Like, yeah. Anyways, so she tells Crawford that she looked up yourself, because one of the things he says is like, look deep within yourself, and she's like, I found it. It's a storage place in Baltimore.
Yeah.
One of the clues from Lecter found a self-storage place by that name, where space has been paid for in advance for many years by the name of Moffat, the name that Lecter gave Clarice. And so
10 years. It's been paid 10 years in advance, and 10 years is significant.
Yeah. Jesus, I know, right? Clarice goes there and enters the storage space, eventually finding a car in the back containing the severed head of one of Lecter's former patients in a jar.
Yeah, the storage unit that appears to belong to a weird old queen.
Yeah. In the book, the space is actually owned by Benjamin Raspail, who's the guy that we're going to find out, the head in the jar.
Yes.
He's Lecter's patient, a victim, and he's a flutist for the Baltimore Orchestra. And in the book, Lecter kills him because he wanted to improve the orchestra, since he thought Raspail was a terrible flute player.
Which I guess that could have...
It
could have gone either way in the story.
It's a little too silly. It's just a little too silly. Works in the context of like the TV show and shit, because there's also that movie, that show's got a bit of a sense of humor. But like in this movie's trying to play it straight, right?
And maybe that's one of the things that throws me a little bit about the story, is that there are odd moments of humor in this, and they don't feel like they belong.
Yeah, because that's what I was saying. Like in those outtakes and shit, all of the movie's sense of humor ended up cut out. So when it does hit, like there's a little bit of it left over, like little odds and ends, it feels a little weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
because I also think it's a little bit, one of the other things that bugs me is like, what are the odds that this old serial killer also knows this new serial killer, and they have this connection? It's like, what? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
What did they meet on Craigslist? What is
this? That's the comic book shit that Harris kind of always throws into us. Like in Red Dragon, like Lecter actually calls Francis Dollarhide on the phone at one point. Like, how the fuck
and works. It works if you're leaning into this kind of pulpiness of the story.
Because this actually, again, going back to the TV show, it works in the context of the TV show, because the TV show freely lets its freak flag fly, and it has a really wild sense of humor about it, but just not here.
And I think you see it a lot too in their banter, like because I think Anthony Hopkins and I want to say Jamie Lee Curtis, it's not right, Jodie Foster, have really good chemistry, but it feels like it's rooted in like Fred McMurray and what's her face, Barbara Stanwyck in like Double Indemnity. Like it's this patter where they're just sort of like, it's tennis, they're knocking it back and forth, and it's like, it's cute, it's witty, it's a little charming, but it's like in the context of this movie, it doesn't feel right.
No, because like this is supposed to be dour and but okay. So Clarice returns to the hospital to talk to Lecter about what she found, working out the anagrams in the name and deducing that he was the person responsible for renting the space. Lecter sits in the shadows at the back of his cell. He wants to see the Buffalo Bill case file and explains that The head belongs to the man Benjamin Raspail, a former patient. When Raspail missed...
Oh, this is when he says, do you think Jack Crawford wants you sexually?
Does he think of fucking you? Yeah, when Raspail missed...
Various scenarios.
When Raspail missed several appointments, Lecter went to check on him and found him in his current state, presumably a head in a jar, and he hid it away on behalf of the killer, who may or may not be Buffalo Bill. So Lecter uses the word transformation when talking about whoever killed Raspail, a fledgling killer's first attempts at transformation. He also volunteers to help her catch Buffalo Bill if he can see the case file, and muses that in return, he'd like to be moved to a federal institution where he at least has some sort of view. Then Clarice...
There's no fucking way they would give him that case file.
I know, right? Clarice...
Also, he has a mirror in his cell, and it's like, you're going to all these lengths to, there's a fucking plexiglass across the thing, and you give him a mirror?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can't break it. Who knows? Clarice deduces that Lecter knows who Raspail's killer is. So we cut to a lone woman driving in Tennessee, rocking out to Tom Petty.
Man, I fucking love this Tom Petty song.
It's so good.
I came to Tom Petty pretty late, but goddamn, American Girl, fucking righteous song.
Man, that whole record is so good. Yeah.
It is really good.
Yeah. As she approaches her apartment, a man wearing night vision goggles clocks her. Walking back to her apartment, she spots a dude in an arm cast struggling to put a sofa in the back of his van. So
it's a bit of a nod to Ted Bundy.
Yep. So she stops to help him with it, pays dearly for it.
Because he's like, "Oh, you should get around. You get in first." And then she gets in the thing, and he says, "Hey, say,
you about a size 14?
You about a size 14?" And my note says, "Rude."
I know. Yep.
Also, the sound of him punching her in the van is really upsetting.
It's so intense. That's that fucking sound design, man.
Yeah.
So Brooke Smith, who plays Catherine, tried to get Demme to use "Banned in DC" by Bad Brains instead of Tom Petty.
Love that song too.
In the 80s, she was a well-known figure in the New York hardcore scene as a photographer.
Really?
Yeah, I met her very briefly through a friend down in Rhode Island. She's very nice. When I was introduced before I met her, he was like, "Don't say shit about like lotion and baskets. All right, just be cool."
Be like, just ask her about the Bad Brains, and be like, "Well, you probably don't want to know anything about Bad Brains. They seem like real shitty people."
she published a book of her photography called Sunday Matinee.
Really?
Yeah, you can go to the website and it's like photos of her and like Roger Murray and Harley, not Harley
Flanagan.
Warren. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah,
so there's a, I don't know if it's been confirmed or not, but she was dating Ted Levine at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's actually like a confirmed thing.
It might be a little apocryphal. I've read several reports in like just notes here and there that like they were pretty tight on the set.
I mean, I get it. Like he's a good looking dude, but that's a rough dynamic you got to have in this film, though.
I know you're in your.
Then again, I mean, they're only in like 2 scenes together.
I know you're in your trailer. There's a makeout sesh happening, and then you go into the set. You have to get down to you have to put the lotion in the basket.
Yeah,
he's up there.
It's like I have to mock you viciously.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always wondered about that voice that he has in this because it's distinct. And it's very much like a character.
I mean,
detail.
It's kind of his own voice a little bit, but there's definitely an affectation to it. That. He has a very deep voice.
Yeah, but
in this, he has he's doing something. That's very strange.
He has a way of talking where he's almost not moving his jaw.
Yeah,
so it's almost like he's talking like Eddie Vedder sings.
Okay, yeah, and he's also there's like a weird almost laugh to everything he says.
Yeah,
like
especially
everything
is
sarcastic.
At the end when Clarice has like
don't ruin it. Don't ruin my moment.
Okay, okay, all right. Yeah. So at Quantico, Starling is pulled out of a training sesh to accompany Crawford to West Virginia.
In the smallest plane I've ever seen.
It's just a Cessna.
Why is this plane so small?
It's a Cessna. It's a single-engine plane. They're just squeezed into the back.
But so okay, I wouldn't have thought much of this except. Very often when we see Clarice, she is filmed in extreme, like close proximity to the other people she's with, and it's always a man.
Yeah.
And
Like,
in the scenes where like
her in the scenes where she and Crawford are driving in the car. Like they're almost head to head, even though she's in the back seat.
Yes. And so I wonder if there's something to that, but it's like, it's very noticeable that they're like in each other's laps in this plane. It's like, you're the FBI. Do you not have a bigger plane?
No, they don't. They have like shit. They have like shit budgets, man. They're like scratching and scraping all the time.
Law enforcement in the United States? Yeah, they have no fucking money, I'm sure.
CIA gets all the fucking budget.
Then they're in the car and he says, yeah, sir, she has any questions. And I thought, yeah, am I going to get paid for any of this? You're just going to keep exploiting me and putting me in danger.
Yeah. So he runs her through the known facts and asks Clarice to profile Bill, which is a fairly comprehensive profile based on the known facts. She also deduces that Crawford suspects that Lecter knows who Bill is and calls him out on it. Then they arrive at the funeral home where the latest body is being kept and run into
This is where they do the flashback, and it's really fucking cool because it's such a seamless transition between present and past.
And it's just smart editing. It's not like no special effects or nothing. It's just fucking perfect. The local sheriff greets them with some hostility. Crawford diffuses the situation by being high-key sexist for the cops in front of Clarice.
Mm-hmm. This is another one of those moments where we get, like, they do a really good job of showing Clarice's otherness in these settings.
Yeah. Because, again, like, she's always portrayed as, like, a small person.
And she's actually not that small. Like, as a human being, she's not a small person. Like, it's the way they shoot her.
Well, yeah, it's because they kind of, they always shoot her from above, and when they kind of do those panning shots of all of the cops, the angle is very low. It's like...
Yeah, it's very Citizen Kane.
It's like whenever they did anything in Burnt Offerings, like, it's always from a low angle.
I like how I went Citizen Kane and you went Burnt Offerings.
I also
it's
said
like how I went Hannibal Rose and you went Hannibal.
Yeah, I went Thomas Harris. You went Umberto Eco.
Yeah,
who knew? You were the cultured one.
I'm a lot more highbrow than I thought. What with all my tchotchkes and toys?
So with a few minutes to kill, Clarice's attention is drawn to a wake in progress. And she approaches the coffin, flashing back to her childhood where she was at her father's wake. It's chaos in the examining room with cops everywhere, and then Clarice single-handedly clears the room so the FBI and the examiner can run an exam. And when they unzip the body bag, they reveal a body that's been in the water for some time. Clarice struggles with the condition of the body, but pushes through, anxiously recording her observations. She notices that the body is missing some fingernails, and then looking at a photo taken of the victim's mouth, she notices that there's something lodged in her throat.
Now, this is when he says, what do you see? And she says, her ears are pierced 3 times and her nail polish, it looks like town to me.
Right.
Shady. Very shady.
So when they remove it, they find a large cocoon. Then they turn the body over, revealing 2 diamond-shaped cuts where the skin was removed. And that medical examiner, the guy, he looks...
Oh, he was on Deadwood.
Oh, that's where I saw him. He looks so familiar.
He was the doctor on Deadwood. Yeah. Did you watch it, Deadwood?
Yeah.
That show fucking ruled.
On the way out of town, Crawford explains why he did the sexist shit at the funeral home, explaining that he was putting on a show for the locals and didn't mean it. But given how dismissive the local cops were of her, she points out that it matters how he behaves.
Yeah, stick up for yourself and for all women, Clarice. Fuck this guy.
Yeah. So Clarice takes the cocoon to a pair of entomologists at the Smithsonian Institute for identification. And they're a pair of...
Oh, you mean the lone gunman that she goes to?
Yes, the lone gunman. I thought the same fucking thing. There's
this moment, I actually really like this moment because I forgot how charming Jodie Foster can be.
Yeah.
And she's very, very charming in this moment. There's a couple of moments where she really, like, there's the moment at the self-storage place where she's pretty charming, and then here she is as well. And it's like, it's a weird moment here, but there's something kind of cute to it.
Yeah, well, I think that this was a sort of a deliberate moment because Chilton hits on her, and she's just like, "What the?"
Well, because he's a fucking scumbag.
But then one of these doctors does too. But he's just way overt about it. He's awkward, and he's kind of cute about it, and she just plays along with it, and it's just sort of a contrast, you know.
And I guess I think we've all become so accustomed to Jodie Foster being this sort of prestige actor that when we see these moments, it's like, oh, right, you're very good at this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, even when she was a child actor, she always played these very precocious characters. And so to see her be sort of playful and natural, it's like it's a really nice moment in this movie.
Yeah. So they carefully remove the cocoon, revealing a moth with a skull-shaped pattern on its back, calling it the Death's Head moth, an insect only found in the climates of certain parts of Asia. Concluding that the person who raised it did so from imported eggs and with great care.
Hey, these moths, fucking disgusting.
They're intense. I think part of it is they're also huge.
We went to, I don't know, it might have been the last time that we all went to Salem. We were in, I can't remember some store, it's like a fucking tchotchke store or whatever. And Elena bought.
In Salem?
Yeah, believe it or not, Elena bought a pinned Death's Head moth. And I was like, if I ever found one of those in my home, I would have to burn the house down. I would have no choice.
What choice would you have? You have to.
Yeah, it's like our last when we moved to our last apartment, we found these they're called I don't know if they're house centipedes or something. They're the most terrifying bug I've ever seen in my life, and I was like, "Oh, I can't live here, I guess."
No, you just got to take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
I read an article today that was like, "Oh, the timber rattlesnakes are making a big comeback in Massachusetts." I was like, "Well, time to pack up and move, I guess."
They got aggressive turkeys, timber rattlesnakes.
Look, I thought moving to a city, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this. God damn it.
Well, the country follows you. So we then cut to the basement of a serial killer as similar moths fly around. We steady cam around the basement moth habitat, an operating room, and into a sewing room where the lone naked man busily works the sewing machine while a woman yells in the distance, panning past the man into a dirt floor room with a large pit in it, and we don't see the bottom of it yet.
It's not, everybody describes it as a pit. It's a well.
Because nobody ever calls it a well, and it just looks like a pit. I see it as a pit. Then again, we also had a dry well in that fucking house we lived in Northampton. So
what are you talking about?
In the fucking barn. They covered it up because it was dangerous. Immediately as soon as we moved in.
I feel like that's something I would have gone down into.
Believe me, I wanted to. Actually, that house's lower regions was terrifying. So at Quantico,
says you. I'll tell the story about you hiding in the closet if you want.
That story is fucking crazy. No, we're running long already.
All right.
I'll save it for TikTok. So
remember that social media. You're gonna get a story about a supposed haunting and him hiding in his closet.
That fucking house was haunted as hell.
No, it wasn't. Hauntings aren't real. Ghosts are fake.
Anyway, at Quantico, Clarice catches a news report identifying Bill's latest victim. It is Catherine Martin, daughter of a U.S. senator. Senator Martin gives a statement.
Lover of Tom Petty. Just like the rest of us.
No. Yeah. Clarice, with a heightened purpose to rescue Catherine, goes back to see Lecter running afoul of Chilton, who Lecter refuses to cooperate with. So Clarice presents Lecter with an offer.
Well, quid pro quo,
yeah.
Clarice.
If he divulges the identity of Buffalo Bill, he'll be moved to a federal facility with some perks if he helps. So,
this is where he has a couple questions. He says, was she a large girl?
Roomy.
Big through the hips? Roomy? Jesus Christ, roomy?
Oh, man, yeah.
The fuck?
That is such a strange adjective. Yeah. Lecter offers.
This is when they start throwing around the terms transsexual and transvestism, and it's like it's just jarring now to hear those terms.
It's so old-fashioned.
And to be fair, those are different things.
Yes.
Like there are people who have a sexual fetish where they derive, some sort of pleasure from dressing up in the other gender's clothing. But these are different things. And it's like, just to hear people tossing them around so casually, it's like, oh man. It's like when you watch movies from the 90s and they use certain slurs and it's like, God.
Yeah. They haven't lost their edge.
Really, they hit pretty hard.
Yeah. So Lecter offers to cooperate, but only if she tells him some things about herself. He wants to know the worst thing that ever happened to her. So,
did the rancher make you perform fellatio?
So she tells him the story of her father's death when she was 10, leaving her an orphan. And then we go over to Lecter knows things about the murders. They were larger women, and he knew about the cocoon, a symbol of change, indicating
because they're roomy. They're roomy. That's the proper medical term.
Yep. He then asks for more details about her life. Clarice explains that she was moved to a distant family member's farm in Montana that she eventually ran away from.
This is where we get that mirroring shot of
Yes.
I don't know why it struck me. Like, so I've been watching a lot of Ingmar Bergman lately.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
You are definitely the classier of the two of us.
Vindicated. But I was like, I've been noticing more. I don't know, maybe it's this podcast. Who fucking knows? But I've been noticing more of these just like really beautiful moments in movies, just really subtle things that directors and cinematographers do. Regardless, I mean, we see them in John Carpenter movies where like there's just like moments that are so stunning, and this is one of them where I was like, that is some real clever shit right there, because it tells you everything you need to know about their relationship. That when she's talking, you can still see him right next to her, even though he is not next to her, and then vice versa. It's just a really nice touch in a movie where you don't get a lot of those touches.
Yeah.
So I think
he wants to throw a little artistry in there.
Yeah, it's a great moment.
Lecter explains that Bill's derangement has him convinced that he's trans, but he isn't really.
Oh, this is where we get the pathology and the savagery and the brutality.
Yeah. And then he probably applied to and been rejected by one of the 3 hospitals that do gender reassignment surgery, and that she should look there. While they talk, we cut away to Chilton's office where he listens to their conversation through hidden mics.
This is another one of those. I guess one of the things that bothers me about this is the kind of dragnettiness of it all. Like there's a little bit of like Inspector Gadget going on here where I'm like, what the fuck is this? Come on.
Yeah. Now we cut back to Bill's basement. He sits at the top of the pit, insisting that
it rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
So good.
Love this fucking scene so much.
And also, I mean, I think Ted Levine I think his performance is the standout performance in this movie because he is so unsettling.
Extremely. It's a little bit of the script, but it's also a lot of just the way that he delivers it. You know, he's got that weird voice. He keeps calling Catherine it. It rubs the lotion on its skin. Does this whenever it's told. Now it places the lotion in the basket.
Put the fucking lotion in the basket!
Put the fucking lotion in the basket!
My favorite part, and a thing that I do quite frequently, is when she starts screaming and he starts going, ah!
Yeah.
So fucking good.
The light with the basket illuminates the walls of the pit, revealing bloody scratches and the missing fingernails of the last victim, and Bill ruthlessly, cruelly mocks Catherine's screaming.
And look, this moment is really gratuitous and stupid, but it's also really upsetting.
It is. It's like we are seeing this man's like psychopathology on display fully, and it's fucked up. And it is alienating like it ought to be. So,
and it's so, I don't know. It's like to want to root your movie in real psychopaths and real serial killers, but to also make them cartoonishly villainous is a very odd choice.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is, like, some of these guys, like, you read about them and you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, this is like the most harrowing shit I've ever heard. But like, there's also a banality to it. Like to a character like BTK or something like that, where there's a sort of high flying quality to the man's sort of methods, but like the way that he conducted himself is just really fucking boring. And
I will tell you that is true and not true. Because again, every day, 7 days a week, do this. And, it is true that there's a lot of like, there's a reason why you hear the same stories over and over. Because yes, for the most part, murder is actually quite boring. But when you get into the story, it's like you move along and you're like, yeah, okay, there's rape and there's murder and it's, you know, it is what it is, and you keep moving. But inevitably you reach a point where reach a point where I'm just like, oh no. Oh, I didn't want to know that part. Like, I do hit a point every single time where I'm like, oh, I can't put that in there.
Yeah, there you go, morbid listeners. He's holding back on you.
Oh yeah, morbid listeners, I hold back on you a lot. Trust me. There is shit I don't think anybody needs to hear, and I don't put it in there for that very reason, because it is absolutely upsetting.
Yeah. I mean, my point is just like, that's a lot of like the reality of it. Just doesn't make a good movie.
You got to make him villainous. Otherwise it's just like, oh, right. Someone's killing someone else. And this is my complaint, because if anybody pays attention to the morbid social media, there's a lot of, oh, great, another old timey story and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, because most of the time it's just like, oh, great, some man killed his wife. It's really just men killing women over and over again. And there is a lot of like, it does become kind of banal after a while, where you're like, oh, great, another story about a guy killing a lady. Hooray. So I guess, yeah, you do sort of have to, you got to twirl the mustache a little bit.
Got to give him some juice.
And so they do, and he...
One of the most memorable scenes in a movie full of memorable scenes.
It really is fantastic. My friend Brian and I do it to each other all the time. It is very odd, but it is hilarious.
So now Chilton, laying on Lecter's bed with a pen, tells Lecter, who is restrained in a straitjacket on a dolly with a wire appliance that makes it impossible for him to bite anyone. He explains that Senator Martin made no such deal with the FBI and that he's been had by Clarice. But
now I don't understand the purpose of Dr. Chilton as a villain. What is he doing for the story?
Good question. Because I also have a certain ambivalence toward this character.
And towards the actor. I know I said he was on that other show, and it's like, I guess I just don't like him as an actor. Yeah. I think it might be his face and his hair. Is that shallow? It is. It's shallow. Yeah. But there's something about him where I'm just like, he comes across as like, did you watch, you probably didn't, Top Chef? Did you ever watch Top Chef?
No, I watched Master Chef.
Okay, so Top Chef I think it's season 2 of Top Chef is Marcel. And Marcel was famous on Top Chef because he gets assaulted, where they like hold him down and shave his head because he has big stupid hair, what makes him look like
what kind of cooking
Lucy
show
Brown.
Is this? What the fuck?
Top Chef, it's a competition. So he has this big, like, fluffy hair. He looks like Sally Brown from Peanuts. And they hold him down on one and they shave his head. But that's not the point. The point is he's like a really sniveling, awful. He's the villain of the piece in that season. And this character reminds me of him. And there's something about him that feels, again, a little cartoonish in a way that doesn't feel right for the movie. Maybe it does for the book. But in the movie, you're like, what are you doing here? Like, how are you furthering the story? And I don't think he does. He's just a weird character they sort of stick in there.
They shaved his head on a cooking show?
Yeah, it's a big guy. You remember when
Gordon Ramsay just yells at you.
Remember when Steven slapped Irene in season 3 of Real World?
No, we talked about this.
We talked about it. He is the villain. Marcel is the villain of season 2.
I just didn't realize that you could do that.
Look, there are 19 seasons. I cannot bring you up to speed on it.
So Chilton.
Yeah, how do you come back from that? I don't know.
Chilton explains that due to his political connections, he made a deal with the actual senator to do what Clarice said she was going to do. But also, it's implied that he leaves the pen on Lecter's bed.
Which this is one of those Deus Ex moments where it's like, he is in a straitjacket with a face mask on. How does he get the pen?
Oh, well, presumably Chilton just walks away, completely forgets him.
Yeah, but they're taking him away.
I don't know. Maybe they let him out of the thing and then they put him back in it.
Yeah, that's the thing that would happen, huh?
Lecter reveals Bill's first name, but will only reveal the full name in person to Senator Martin. Lewis. Supervisory Special Agent Roger Corman calls Crawford to bust him up for making a phony deal and to inform him of the real deal.
Look, I'll tell you what, Roger Corman holds his own.
He's a pretty good actor, man. He does what he's
not a bad actor.
Yep. And there's a guy named Special Agent Paul Krendler listening in on the phone. Krendler will play a much larger role in the next story and get his brain eaten. He informs Crawford that they're moving Lecter.
I'll tell you, I find that moment very upsetting.
I love it. When they're moving Lecter for a meeting with Martin, Krendler is tasked with taking over the case in Tennessee. So basically, Crawford and Clarice are off the case. At the Tennessee airport, Lecter is moved on a dolly with the iconic face mask that this movie made so famous. Chilton goes...
Which I believe is from... They did do this with somebody. I can't remember who it was, but they did do this because he kept spitting and biting.
Oh,
people.
well, this mask in particular was made for the movie. It was made by a...
Yeah, not the mask part, but like the...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like the whole sort of like big get-up thing. Like the he's really outfitted in a ridiculous way, but it is inspired by something that they did actually use.
Yeah. So Chilton goes to sign some custody papers. He can't find his pen. Ooh. And then they wheel Lecter over to the senator. And,
oh, you mean Chekhov's pen?
Chekhov's pen, baby. Senator Chilton proudly introduces him. Lecter explains that Bill's name is Louis Friend.
This is what he says. Louis had murdered a transient and done things with her skin.
Yeah, in the book, Bill's deteriorating mental state causes Raspale to leave him for another guy, and in a fit of rage, Bill kills the other guy and makes an apron out of his skin.
That's
yeah,
goofy.
It's pretty silly. Lecter then menaces the senator for a bit of fun before describing Buffalo Bill and giving his last known location. Then he's moved to a holding facility in a museum gallery where Clarice goes to visit.
Yeah, but before they go, he says, "Oh, Senator,
I love
your suit. Look, he is gay as hell. I don't know.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
He's reading her for her fucking shoes and cheap shoes in her bag, and now he's like, love your suit.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, he really loves ladies, I'm sure.
During the elevator ride on the way up, the guy riding with Clarice says, "Is he some kind of vampire? Is that true what I heard?" And she says, "They don't have a name for what he is."
And I audibly said, "Yes, they do. He's a serial killer."
I love that. It's so ominous.
It is a good. It's a good line. Though. Also, I think there's a lot of great dialogue. Like as much as as a script doesn't hold together very well because I think they had to do so much cutting that there's shit that ends up staying in that feels discontinuous because it's missing the other parts of it. And then like the story doesn't sort of weave together the way it should. But there's a lot of really great dialogue.
Yeah. Clarice is allowed to see Lecter, bringing him the drawings from his cell, which Chilton had confiscated.
This is when he's in his giant bird cage in that fancy ballroom.
As she approaches, Lecter has his back to her, but he knows that it's her.
And as much as I've been bitching about the cartoony elements of this, I do like this, like they're drawn to one another type, that kind of thing. Like, I don't think there's anything
right now. It has been so overused in other movies, but like this was kind of like the flashpoint for that.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's Holmes and Moriarty. It's it's Taylor's oldest time, but it works really well. And it's certain points in this movie where it could have felt real fucking goofy.
Yeah. He's real annoyed with her. Pegs her for the parts of the lie that she came up with. And she identifies that the name Louis Friend is an anagram for iron sulfide. The fool's gold, then asks for more help. Lecter informs her that she has everything she needs to find Bill. He tries to guide her to the answer without giving it up and becomes frustrated when she can't seem to land on the answer, revealing...
This is the part that I really don't like in her performance. And I think she does it a little bit throughout, where she's like, overly earnest and hyper emotional in a way where you're like, oh, this was written by a man.
Sure. Yeah.
Because she does it a couple times, but she's like, and I think we're supposed to get the feeling like, oh, the clock is fucking ticking. We've got to go here. Like, just tell me I can't play this game with you anymore. But she doesn't come across that way. She comes across as though a man had written her. This is how he thinks a woman would come across that way. And it's like, that's the part where I'm like, this doesn't feel, again, authentic to this character.
The hint is he covets what he sees every day. And then he demands that she answer why she left the ranch. And this is when he's talking to her. It's those
because of the screaming.
Because of the screaming. Those tight close-ups of him like not blinking, the unblinking face of evil.
Some kind of screaming, like a child's voice.
So Clarice tells the full story after some goading.
You didn't yes and me on that at the top. It was terrible.
I know. I wanted to save it for for the movie.
You blew it.
I fucking suck at this. This is it. Podcast's over. Sorry, guys. So Clarice tells us a story about hearing a commotion in the barn, a screaming, and when she went to check, she found that they were slaughtering the lambs. So she tried to free them, but when she opened the pen, they just stood there and didn't leave. So she took one lamb and ran with it, but she didn't get far. If she could save just one. ... And when the rancher caught up with her, he sent her to an orphanage, and then they killed the lamb anyway.
This is a little insane because at a certain point, I think it's earlier, it's much earlier, when she's like, no, he was a good man. It's like, if he kicked you out for trying to save a lamb as a child, I don't think he is a good man. I think he's a fucking monster.
Yeah. He was just looking for an excuse anyways. He got this kid.
He just saddled me with this kid.
Yeah.
She's precocious and overly earnest. I can't do this.
So Lecter then deduces that she still hears the screaming and that saving Catherine will silence the screaming.
And we have a title. And this is when he strokes her finger. It's really gross.
It's a little weird. Tally's script had another young Clarice flashback written here, and they also scouted locations in Montana for it. But in the end, Demme, he felt that keeping the camera on Jodie Foster the entire time for a single take monologue was a far better idea, and he wasn't wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it could, if it had been any of those other women that they had wanted for this role, yeah, go to Montana. But no, she doesn't.
She's just that goddamn good, man. Lecter is about to tell Clarice Bill's real name when they're interrupted by Dr. Chilton and several jailers, including George Romero. Yep. Most of this movie was shot around Pittsburgh, so
that's the only way you get Romero to do anything.
It doesn't travel.
Wait, are you filming it at my house? Yeah. I'm in.
Clarice,
I get it. That's why I do everything.
Clarice is rushed off to the airport and sent home. Lecter remains, of course, and the jailers bring him a meal. He produces a piece of Chilton's pen from his mouth and palms it as the jailers cuff him to the bars in order to open his cell and deliver his meal.
Also, did you notice he's reading Bon Appetit?
Yes.
I find this scene very upsetting.
I love it. It's so intense because it's the first time you see him truly.
Yeah, and that I think that is the point of this is to be like, oh, he's been so charming.
Oh yeah. You
so
like
genteel.
Hannibal Lecter? Check this out.
Right, and that is the point of this scene. But it's rough. It is very violent.
He unlocks the cuffs with a pen. Suddenly attacks the cop closest to him, cuffing him to the bars and attacking the other by biting his face and spraying him with mace. And then he turns on
which I don't want to be that guy, but if he was spraying him in the face with mace, if anybody has ever been in a room where mace has been discharged, you know that it does not just go in one direction.
No, I think there's an Office joke about that where like Dwight sprays it and it gets in literally everybody's eyes.
Yeah, it is. It is very painful.
Then he turns on the cuffed cop with the nightstick and joyfully beats him to death.
And there is something about that moment that I was like, oh God, that is very hard to watch.
It's why it's one of those like enduring scenes. And then we get the iconic shot of Lecter in the light, sort of bloody, enjoying the classical music, satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
And then hearing that one of the cops is still alive, he recovers a pocket knife and leaves his cell to do something terrible before staging his escape. There's gunshots on the floor above, which alert the cops on the ground floor that something bad is happening, and they all get ready to go check it out. And so when the cops enter the gallery, they find it in a real horror movie state with one of the cops strung up on the cage, disemboweled, and the other one struggling for air on the floor, and Lecter is missing.
Now, look, if I were to sit down next to a man who had his face
I'm not going to say, oh, you're doing good. You're looking real good there.
He's trying to be real positive. But also, I feel like I would notice that person was wearing someone else's face. I'd be like, something's not right here. This is
a very shaky horror movie plot point that I just kind of go with because I want to.
Yeah, this is a suspension of disbelief moment if ever there was one.
SWAT arrives, headed up by Chris Isaac, while they prep the surviving cop to leave by ambulance. They're bringing him down the elevator when they notice blood dripping onto the white blanket over the survivor from above, realizing that Lecter is on top of the elevator car. The SWAT goes up a floor and opens the door, seeing Lecter lying on top of the car as expected. They try to talk to him, but he doesn't move, so they shoot him in the leg to no response.
Which, again, I mean, that feels like, yeah, probably.
Yeah. When they open the hatch of the elevator from below, they find the body of the cop that they think is on the way to the hospital. In the ambulance, Lecter sits up on the stretcher, removing the cop's face from his own like a mask, and attacks the ambulance crew. And then Clarice works out the Buffalo Bill victim disappearance and locations where their bodies were found. He finds a detail that everybody missed, that Bill was friends with the first victim. So she heads off to West Virginia or Ohio, maybe, to follow up on the lead in person, going to Frederica Bimmel's home. She goes through her belongings, eventually finding a bunch of Polaroid photos of her mostly undressed.
Get the fuck out of here.
I know. This is the part where I'm always like, what drove her to do that? Like, what was her instinct? They don't explain it.
Because they had to do.
This is the moment we were talking about where she's going to have her big revelation, and now they're going to race towards the end.
And I like this scene at Frederica Bimmel's house. I think it's a really good way of. It's like a deeply humanizing moment. But I guess this is, I think, the thing that throws me. Another thing that throws me about this movie is that it's trying to walk this line, and I'm sure the original script was much different. I think, like you said, I think there was a lot more, it was a lot more theatrical. It was a lot more like a little cheeky. And it's trying to walk this line of being like prestige thriller. But they leave in a lot of this other shit that's a little bit goofy. And so then you have this moment where it's like, oh, these are very humanizing. It reminds you that these are actual murder victims. And if you, there was probably, I know there was a lot of press leading up to it that was like, oh, these are inspired by actual stories.
Yes.
And so this moment, I think, is really good that it serves the plot in that this kind of moves us from sort of the B section to the C section, like the last act of the film. But it also reminds us like these women are actual people. And there's this really kind of, I think there's something really nice about that, but it just doesn't always fit together when you have this like kind of goofy wear in the face and they had the thing falling out of the elevator. And it's like, Jesus Christ, it's hard to reconcile the two things that are happening a lot of the times in this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't dislike the film. I think it's a pretty decent movie, but like, I don't know. The thread doesn't run clean through, I guess.
Yeah. And the thing is I'm so attached to this movie. I'm very willing to overlook a lot of this, but I do like breaking it down like this and being really analytical. Like, yeah, I get this. This is real. These are jarring tones that don't really fit together. And I'm just being very generous because I've loved this movie since I saw it when I was like 15.
And then you get the thing with she opens the music box and the ballerina, and it's like, oh, well, how do we get from, B to C? Well, she rips the top of the fucking music box open, because that's a thing a normal person would do. And it's like, nope, but we just got to get there somehow. And it's like, you have spent a lot of fucking time writing all this clever dialogue between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, she opens the music box top. Good enough, I guess.
Yeah.
You lazy motherfucker.
Also, well, worth noting, and probably a part of the problem here is the shooting script for this was 85% Ted Talley's like first draft.
Huh.
Yeah. So when Clarice goes through her closet, she finds a dress with a pattern taped off on the back in the shape of the diamond cuts found in the last victim, and she
you could have just done that,
right?
Like, why did you just do that part? You don't need the sexy photos too.
Because
that feels a little like exploitation to me as well.
Yeah. When
given all the comments about like
calling them sexy is a little generous. Clarice calls Crawford.
Look, this is a fat shamey movie, let's be fair. And that's essentially what I think the photos are trying to do. And it's a little bit shitty. Like, you didn't even need it. You've got the dress with the diamond pattern on the back that matches her. Like, you've got your fucking thing. You don't even need this part.
If you cut this out, the movie would have been the same.
Yeah.
So Clarice calls Crawford, frantically reports that he's making a suit out of his victim's skin. But Crawford tells her en route that they know who he is and they're on the way to nab him. His real name...
She gets robbed of glory
his
by this fuckhole Jack Crawford.
But he does say, couldn't have got here without you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
His real... Oh, but Jack's been had. His real name is Jamie Gum. He has a photo...
Or James Gum. And I always thought, why James Gum?
In the book... There is a plot detail about his background that because he is the product of like profound abuse his name was spelled wrong on his birth certificate and nobody thought to fix it because nobody cared. His name is Jamie.
Is it satire? What is this?
So also Jack has a photo of who they think is Bill, but it's not the guy that we've been seeing the whole time.
Then who?
I have no fucking clue. In the bottom of the pit, Catherine uses food leftovers to set a trap for Bill's dog, Precious.
This is another part that feels pretty unrealistic.
Well, Bill applies makeup and...
Look, I've never tried to trap a dog and catch it in a bucket, but...
Catherine lures the dog to the edge of the pit, uses the trap to pull the dog in. And then when Bill is ready, he appears to be wearing a part of the woman suit that he's been working on, dancing in front of the video camera to the song Goodbye Horses. So I want to ask you, is this song as spooky as I think it is, or is it just because it's paired up with this scene?
It's this scene. The song is actually quite good.
Because I mean, at the same time, the song, it has this very kind of chilly, sparse melody. It's in a it's in a minor key. The lyrics are nonsense.
It's very, like the Bristol scene in the mid-90s. It was like Portishead and Tricky and all of them. It has that kind of vibe to it. Like, it's a very 90s song. Yeah. It's like a little bit like that, like Yaz and shit like that. Like, it's just a electronic song.
But yeah, something about it is always, I find it a very haunting song. But like, there's preparation.
There's a little bit of discordance, I think, in the vocals, maybe.
Because, I mean, it's like I said, I think mostly what the problem is it's all minor key, which just is sad songs, Well,
and also, I mean, that's how you can tell, like, this is a very effective use of music. If you're just like, I know immediately what that brings to mind. This very sexy dance.
Right. And this song makes me want to just shake it off. This is not the first time he's used this song in a movie. Demme used the song in Something Wild. He met her while she was a struggling artist, and she picked him up in a cab because she was a taxi driver. And she was like, hey, do you work in the music industry? And he's like, no, I'm a filmmaker. And she's like, well, fuck it. Here's my song, and played it anyways. And he was like, what is this? This is amazing. Because like he uses this song in Married to the Mob. Also, there's another song of hers in Something Wild. And I believe she actually performs in Philadelphia.
Yes, she is in Philadelphia. And I think this is a great song. I've only heard a couple other songs, and I'm not impressed with it, but like, I think this is a good song.
Yeah. There is just something about it that's very captivating. Like I said, it sticks with you, paired with this really fucked up scene.
And this scene is mostly
Ted Levine. Ted Levine's entire it was in the book, but they did not do it in the script. And he's like, no, I really think I ought to do this. This is like a really kind of important character moment. And they were like, fucking fine. And again, another iconic scene in a fucking movie full of iconic scenes.
Now, I always thought, I hope you're going to explain the scene. We've talked it up so much. I always thought he looks a little bit like David Lee Roth.
Yeah. It's the wig. Is it a wig? It's a wig.
Yeah. Well, is it a wig? Technically, I guess.
I mean, anything can be a wig if you try hard enough.
In as much as it's not his hair, someone else's.
It's definitely like, it's the shape of his face. It's that wig. It's that like shawl that he's got. It's all a little David Lee Roth.
Well, and I think that's a very smart moment that they focus very tightly on his face as he's putting on makeup, and you see that it is someone else's scalp, and that is like, otherwise this could have been, and obviously it is a very it's a one of those moments that does get parodied a lot, but it would have felt very silly if you had not been reminded that this is just he ripped this off of someone else's head.
Yeah, and I mean, also there's all these little things that Ted Levine does. Like, there's a moment where he tucks his penis between his legs, but as he does it, he does this weird look, like he's kind of embarrassed. He like looks off camera.
Well, it's almost like a coy look that he's just like, maybe I'll try this and see how this looks.
Yep, and he loves it.
Because before he does all that, he's checking out his makeup. Did you fuck me? I'd fuck me. I'd fuck me hard.
It's upsetting.
And he's got this beautiful Nazi blanket behind him.
I gotta know. Did he make that? Is he a Nazi, or did Mrs. Lipman make that?
I feel like there was a moment where the set decorator was like, what's bad? What serial killers like? Nazis. They like Nazis. How about a Nazi blanket? And they're like, well, where do you get a Nazi blanket? Someone's going to have to make it.
Or we'll just go to a gun show.
Yep. Oh, God.
Elsewhere, Crawford's hostage team races to get into place while Clarice interviews one of Frederica's friends. She reveals that she and Frederica used to do dress alterations and sewing for a woman in town named Mrs. Lipman.
And I love this moment. I think this is one of those moments that I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer, whatever one of those reviews, about talking about the sort of side characters. This girl is really good.
Yeah.
Like, she really comes across as she feels very natural, as just sort of like just an ordinary working at the diner kind of gal.
Yep. Working at the bank, free toasters and Barry Manilow on the speakers.
Sounds great.
So now we begin the clumsiest bait and switch in an otherwise pretty solid movie. We see the presumed Buffalo Bill's residence in Illinois, while inside Bill argues with Catherine at the bottom of the pit as she holds Bill's injured dog.
Yeah, don't you make me hurt your dog.
Yep. So the HRT guys from the FBI get into position to enter Bill's house with an agent posing as a delivery guy, repeatedly ringing the doorbell, but no one answers.
So this is where they use that sort of reverse, like they keep doing it with all the flashback scenes that are just really seamless. This is where it doesn't work that way. It feels a little clunky here.
Right, because then eventually, like, Bill goes and he answers the door, and you're supposed to be expecting the delivery guy, the FBI, but it's Clarice at the door. But this is so wobbly. It doesn't. It feels a little bit like a cheap trick to me.
Yeah. Or it's more like big reveal.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, yeah, except I saw it coming, so.
Right, and then the FBI busts in on the house that they're staking out, and they find it completely empty. So Crawford realizes that Clarice found the right guy and is in the right place right now alone.
Yes, she sure is.
So Clarice talks to Bill for a bit. He lures her into the house.
Well, before she comes inside, she just talks about she's looking for somebody.
Yeah.
And she describes Frederica Bimmel, and he says, oh, wait, is she a great big fat person?
That's a really good impression.
Yeah. And it's a fucking terrible line.
It is, yeah.
The fat shaming of this movie is really awful. It feels very 90s.
Oh.
That fucking line is so great, though. Wait. Because it's the way it's delivered. It's a lot like his mocking yell. He knows what he's saying to her, and he knows that he's sort of letting on that he knows.
Right. It's because what he's going to do is he's going to kind of pump her for information, but at the same time, like, the way he regards her is he's like, oh shit, like, I'm found. Like, this is the end game right now. So she'll go.
But he plays it from here on out. Like, we don't get a lot of time with him in this movie, which is kind of, I don't know. I think that actually works.
I think it's a perfect amount of time for him.
I think we also get 11 minutes with Anthony Hopkins in the movie as well.
It's more like 20 minutes. Yeah.
But it's probably to his benefit that we don't get a lot of time, but this is the most we get with him. And he is so fucking good.
Oh, you savor it. You savor it.
Yeah. It's super cool.
Yeah. So he lures her into the house and he kind of pumps her for information about the case, trying to figure out if he needs to kill her or not. And then as they talk, Clarice spots a death's head moth and realizes that she found the guy.
Yeah.
And that's when he's got all the cards in his hand, and she's like zeroing in on him, and he does that thing where he kind of like laughs into his hand.
And then he does like a weird twirl and drops all the cards.
I described it as a sachet. She gets him at gunpoint. And
it's a very strange moment, but he sort of chuckles and spins a little bit and drops all of these cards with this big hand flourish, and then like runs into the other room. It is a really awesome moment.
It is. It's cool. It's a very weird scene that I love. Like, again, Ted Levine, you rule.
And this is when she also stops to take off her coat, which I think is a really great touch in the moment, because it's like,
that's definitely like some FBI training. Like, you don't want shit you're going to get your hands all caught up
in.
I
feel like it's just a natural reaction. It's like, I have to move and this is restrictive. I have to take this off. Like,
yeah. It's like, for the same reason why, like, when she chases him down into the basement, like, she'll see open doors and she'll close them so he can't like get the drop.
Well,
on her
because
and
we
stuff.
have the moment at the very beginning of the film where she's
Yes.
doing the training and the guy's like, bang, you're dead. What
Yeah.
did you miss? And so this is a bit of a callback to that. But I just think this is another one of those really nice moments where it's like, what would you do in this moment? Well, you take off anything that is restricting your movement. You just instinctively do it. I can't chase somebody if I've got this big fucking bulky coat on. I think it's really nice. It's just like another smart touch.
Yeah. Yeah. So then she chases him down into the basement, into his dungeon,
Which is full of more Nazi propaganda for some reason.
yeah. I looked that poster up. I stopped and I was like, what does that fucking poster say? So I stopped and I looked it up. It's actually not Nazi propaganda. It was World War II propaganda meant to sort of draw America into the war. So that's
right, everybody. We forget sometimes we needed a lot of coaxing to get involved in that one.
Yep. Roger Corman once told Jonathan Demme that the most terrifying thing on film is approaching a closed door. And this entire sequence is Demme putting that into practice.
And this is another one of those moments that could have gone really badly. And in a way, it does feel a little bit cheesy.
It's a little short to me. Like, it's very abrupt. I always remember this scene, like when I go long stretches without watching this movie, I seem to remember this scene in my mind as being way longer, but it's actually very short.
And I think that's a good choice though. Like in reality, this is a very small house. Like one of you is going to kill the other pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. At a certain point, Clarice bursts into a room containing a bathtub full of putrid water and the body of the former Mrs. Lippman. Also we finally see the woman suit at one point. It's like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. And so then Bill cuts the power in the basement. She's in the dark and he has his night vision goggles.
This part I have a little bit of a problem with. Like, look, you would know if someone was standing that close to you.
Yeah.
I mean, he is basically stroking her face and she's just like, huh? What? Where? It's like, you would know that someone was that close. Like you could smell him.
Yeah.
You could, you would just,
and he'd be making noise and stuff like that.
yeah, like you would feel that someone else is in the room with you.
Yeah. He raises his gun and goes to cock it. And the sound alerts Clarice, who spins suddenly and empties her pistol into Bill, breaking a window and dropping the killer, who dies on the floor in front of her.
I like that it's a very unceremonious death, too.
Yeah, in the book, he has last words.
Which I think is a good choice to leave that out.
Oh, sure. Yeah, because like he's just a dead animal now. Like that's the whole thing.
And you gave him he got the flourish, he got the big sachet away, threw the cards, and like that's his exit moment. And he got it, and it was good.
Yep.
Let it lie there.
Yep. Back in Quantico, Clarice is promoted to special agent status.
Yeah, back in Quantico, Clarice gets a fucking automatic promotion to the head of the FBI or whatever. Since you
no. This is like her graduating class.
I know, but like
other people.
Look, she should have. You used her this whole fucking time.
She should have been made a special agent.
That goes unaddressed in this whole movie. It's like, this was an errand she was running for you.
The deadliest internship in the history of internships.
God.
It'll be great exposure.
My grad school internship was at a museum.
Were there any serial killers?
No, just white ladies in Newton, Massachusetts.
So Crawford congratulates her, and then he sort of beats it. Then she takes a phone call from Lecter, who
before that, they have to eat the shiniest cake I've ever seen.
That's definitely movie food. That thing's been sitting around for hours.
We also
get
we bring Ardelia back, and I'm like, whoa, I forgot about her.
Yeah,
I'm glad Ardelia didn't get murdered. I feel like it's 1991. I'm surprised she didn't.
That's a very strong possibility.
Yeah.
Lecter congratulates her and asks
this
her
fucking
if the lambs,
epilogue. This is so unnecessary.
Asks her if the lambs have stopped screaming. And he assures her that he won't come after her, and then informs her that he has to go. He's having an old friend for dinner.
They do. They cut to Hannibal Lecter in this terrible Klaus Kinski wig and that awful Panama hat.
Yeah. Yep. We see Dr. Chilton getting off a nearby plane in the Bahamas.
It's so fucking dumb.
Yep. That's it. That's the late, great Hannibal Lecter that Donald Trump is always talking about.
Well, that and sharks.
And he hangs up and follows.
He's definitely not losing his mind.
No. Always does it. Loves it. Loves to get the press talking about it. Why does he say that? Who fucking cares? Shut up. Yep. Then he hangs up and he follows Chilton into the crowd as he walks away. Roll credits.
I hate the end of this movie.
It's clumsy. It's clumsy and it's rushed.
But it also brings us back to, again, the more you talk about the book, the more I'm kind of thinking about it in the context of the movie. And it's like, there's all this goofy shit that maybe you can make it work in a book because you have a lot more room to kind of play with. But in the movie, you don't. And you've already decided the tone of your film is going to be serious. And so when you cap it with this fucking dumbass, bit at the end, it's like, I don't know, you kind of undid a little bit.
You know what? It's a bit of, I think it's an ending that they shot and they kind of trapped themselves with, because I think that the tone of the movie was ultimately determined in editorial.
Is this Carrie White's arm coming out of the ground? Is that what we're getting here? Like, is this like, there's gonna be a sequel?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is, really.
Which just feels cheap to me.
Well, because also you do kind of have to cap it off, because Lecter just kind of vanishes. And like, you can't end the movie without sort of going like, ping, here's where he's at right now. It would feel incomplete. There's probably a better way to do it.
No, I guess you're right. I think you're right. I think it's just a really dumb, clunky way of being like, oh, but he's going to get one last zinger. And it's like, oh, you didn't need the fucking zinger.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I gotta ask you. Well, I got two questions. Are the lambs still screaming is my first question.
Yes, they will always forever be screaming.
And my second question is, how the hell does this movie hold up? This has got to be the most complicated version of that question I've asked yet.
So for all of my gushing about this movie, I'm going to say something that I think really kind of clashes with that. I don't think this movie holds up very well.
No, I don't either.
I enjoy watching it tremendously. However, it is so deeply rooted in 1991 that the kind of nostalgic moments that I feel as I watch it always kind of bring me back to where I was and what I was doing in that moment. That may or may not be a good thing. I like movies that sort of have a sort of ambiguity about them in terms of like where they were and when they were made. And this just doesn't really hold. It feels it is a movie that is anchored in its time.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's so characteristic of its era, including the missteps.
Yeah, and even it's like its worst misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic qualities. I think it's the fact that it's such a social, like a discussion that we're having now, something that we are as a society trying to fucking work out. It's something that kind of leaps to the fore in a way that makes me feel kind of bad watching it now, but it doesn't, ultimately it's something that I feel like I've reckoned with, but like, I don't know. It's something that it feels louder in the production than it really should be. But otherwise, it's a movie that I do love dearly, and I will continue to enjoy this movie, and I'll drag it out every now and then and watch it. But yeah, it feels so 90s in a way that doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah,
because I don't have many fond memories of movies of the 90s.
No.
So like there's a few, and there's some real sort of cultural, pop cultural items of the 90s that I do feel very strongly about. This is really not one of them.
Yeah, this is very high 80s in aesthetic and in vibe and in tone. And it just, there's too many traps that it steps into that it didn't have to. And I think having said that, it's worth watching once at least. There's some really good performances. I think there's some great cinematography. There's a great score. Otherwise, it's a lot. It's a reminder of all the bad parts of that era.
Yeah.
And I think
fair.
I think
a fair assessment.
that can be a little bit hard to be confronted with. But it is worth seeing at least once, just because it is iconic and because I think there are some really great things about it. They just
huge characters.
Yeah.
A really, really good bad guy. Yeah.
But I would say the same thing. Like if I was just like, oh, hey, have you read Bonfire of the Vanities? It's like, yeah, It's about the shittiest time in American history.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing where it's like, I know it's iconic, but that doesn't mean that I want to have to sit through it again. And there's things I like about this movie, but yeah, it's weird to be like, it's a great watch, but it's also not relevant anymore.
Right.
And it's not relevant in a way that's like not even fun.
No, a part of it is also like there was just a humongous torrent of movies that came after it.
Yeah.
For just like years and years that followed it, that tried to, capitalize on that, try to twist it a little bit. And also in some ways, like there have been movies that are kind of doing the same thing, but they've done it better. So,
Such as?
I think 7 is up there. Not quite as good, but like I feel like it commits to the more comic book elements of this movie than The Silence does.
Yeah, it does feel like maybe there was they're a little restrained by trying to be a little more highbrow than the story allows for. And I don't think 7 didn't do that.
No, another Fincher movie that I think really kind of pulls it off was Zodiac.
That's a decade later, though.
Oh, sure. But like, again, it was a movie that I definitely feel was launched off the back of this one. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely kicked off the true crime, sort of psychotic killer police procedural. And for that, it's worth watching. I think it once.
Yep. All right, cool. Hey, 50th episode.
Woo!
Yeah.
I was trying to go, when I went out earlier today, I was trying to find one of those like, what do you call those? Like a street, like a horn that you blow for like kids parties.
A vuvuzela?
I was not looking for a vuvuzela. I was looking for, what are those fucking things called? Where you blow into them and the thing unrolls and
party toy noisemaker.
Yeah. Okay. That has to have a name, but I went out looking for them. Couldn't find any. I mean, admittedly, I didn't look very hard, but that's,
No.
That's episode 50.
This is quite a milestone. I'm very proud of it. We've come a long ways. We've grown tremendously. I still hear from listeners who've been with us from episode 1. So,
and to you, I say thank you and I'm sorry.
I appreciate every one of you, and I hope you'll stick with us for the next 50.
You took a big swing, and I hope it paid off.
So, hey, what's next?
Well, 99-cent rental. We'll be back in next week with Ghidorah, three-headed monster. In part of it's a two-parter we're doing there.
Yep. Get a little Godzilla in your life.
With my dear friend, Godzilla. Also, 70th anniversary. Everybody get out there, buy Godzilla art, like me. And then in 2 weeks, we will be back for what was supposed to be our actual 50th episode with some fantastic guests. We are talking the 1996 slasher Scream.
Yeah, it was inevitable.
And listen, everybody, unlike the other 90s movies we've done, I promise you, Scream will just be nothing but a...
This is going to be us just like slam dunking and like high-fiving the whole time.
Pretty much. Everybody loves it, and that includes us. So.
All right. Be back here in a week as we do Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and then be back in 2 for what's going to be a real fucking howler.
Yep.
We do Scream.
Put the fucking lotion in the basket!